Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gafar Korea, and I will be your host for today's career seminar. I am an intern at the Lex Lata Center for International Law and Comparative Constitutionalism in Africa. Please ensure that your mics are muted in
I wouldn't do this, so
order
this
not
is
to affect the flow
a responsibility for
of
you.
today's seminar. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to what promises to be an insightful and inspiring seminar. Our theme this year is Building a Global Career in Law Practice, Opportunities and Challenges for a Budding 21st Century Lawyer. This seminar is designed to equip you with practical tools, insights, strategies to thrive in a dynamic environment. We are honored to be joined today by distinguished speakers from globally recognized institutions, all of whom bring a wealth of experience and perspective to our discussions. Over the next few hours, we will explore three critical areas: the practical skills needed for a successful career in international arbitration, Nigeria's emerging influence in global arbitration, and how to effectively build and sustain a cross-border legal career. We hope you find the sessions thought-provoking, interactive, and above all, inspiring. I will now invite the Executive Director of the Lex Lata Center to give the opening address. Once again, thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you very much, Kawia. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's career seminar. It's the fifth edition in the series. We had the very first one in 2020, and it's been very successful over the years. Usually after the career seminars, we've been having very excellent feedback, and I'm very sure that with the amazing lineup of speakers that we have today, the feedback will even be more excellent this time around. So thank you very much, and a big thank you to all the speakers that have, that have left their very busy schedules to, be part of this particular event. I know you will all enjoy today's career seminar. But before I hand over to those who will be handling the first session, there are a few things that I would like to draw your attention to. We have some events that will be holding in August. So I just want to draw your attention to those events and invite you to register for those events. So please, can I have the first flyer, the one for the conference, the webinar on constitution making? So we're having two events in August. We're having a webinar on constitution making. We are also having a constitution making course that will be handled by experts in August. So this is the first one. It's a webinar on constitution making, and you can see that we have a very amazing lineup of speakers there. We have so we have Emerita Professor Christina Murray from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She's an expert on constitution making, so she will be giving a keynote address at that event. We also have Jana Milka Smith, who is the head of projects at Max Planck Foundation in Germany. We have Dr. Neka Okechukwu, who is a senior fellow at the Freiburg Institute for Advanced Studies in Germany. We have Sam Abebe. We have Sam Abebe, who will also be joining us from International IDEA, an international organization that deals with issues on constitutional law and international law. So this is a very important event, and if you look at our web pages, our social media platforms, you will see the links for registration. So please try and register for this particular event. It's going to be a very interesting one. The other one is the constitution making course, which we'll be holding in August as well. Please, can you project the flyer for that? Can we have the flyer for the constitution making course taking place in August? We're having it over a period of 2 weeks, and it promises to be a very, very interesting course, very helpful. Um, I'm sure you are aware that in Nigeria now, especially, we are having our legislators are on the verge of, putting in place new or reviewing the constitution. All right. And this particular course is meant to introduce participants to um, the intricacies of constitution making, what it takes to make a democratic constitution. All right. So it's important that you attend if you are interested. The course will examine the processes involved in the creation, modification, and enforcement of constitutions in Africa. The course will also address the reasons behind the successes and failures of these processes in the history of constitution making in Africa. We'll also examine the ways in which coup leaders and authoritarian regimes may manipulate the constitution making process in order to maintain tight control over the polity. So we'll be looking at such topics as the meaning, nature, and role of constitutions in democratic political systems, models of constitutional design, like federalism, parliamentarism, presidentialism, separation of powers, etc. Processes, principles, and challenges of crafting and implementing constitutions, constitutional systems and their impact on institutional effectiveness. And we'll also be looking at case studies of successful and unsuccessful constitution making efforts with a focus on best practices and potential pitfalls. So the course is suitable for a wide range of people interested in how constitutions are made, including legal practitioners, students, lawmakers, policymakers, officials of ministries of justice, and civil society organizations. So you are invited to register as well. I'm sure we have the link for registration on our social media pages as well. So you can please go to those pages and register to attend. Thank you. So I'll be handing over to Betty to carry on with today's event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I'll be passing the baton to Joy, who'll be giving us information about the Lex Lata Center.
Hello, thank you, Koyat, for that very amazing introduction. My name is Joy, and I will be introducing the Lex Lata Center and telling you a bit about what the center is about. So, our name is the Lex Lata Center for International and Comparative Constitutionalism in Africa. So, about the center, the Lex Lata Center for International Law and Comparative Constitutionalism in Africa, a constituent unit of the Lex Lata Group, is a research, advocacy, and advisory organization dedicated to the progressive study and analysis of international and constitutional law as this field relates to Africa. We advise governments and international organizations on matters relating to international law, private and public, justice, rule of law, human rights, constitutionalism, and democracy on the African continent. About what we do, Our research and technical expertise at Lex Lata spans the broad areas of international law, both private and public, international development, democracy, human rights, constitutionalism, conflict prevention, crisis management, and peace building. We advise and assist public and private institutions in formulating and designing legislative policy and constitutional reform in these areas. We also provide technical training and continuing legal education to personnel of parliamentary and judicial institutions, civil society organizations, electoral bodies, law firms, and other organizations involved in legislative activities, justice administration, and legal advocacy in Africa. The project, the International Law Project. The aim of this research project is to investigate the extent to which the decisions and pronouncements of the international courts and tribunals have shaped the evolution and crystallization of international law in the 21st century. Over a period of 4 years, between 2023 to 2027, the project will, for this purpose, focus on the jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, and the International Center for the Settlement of Disputes. The Constitutional Law Project. The aim of this research project is to design a constitution-making framework that embeds basic uniform standards for African states without ignoring the unique peculiarities of each state. The project entails a rigorous study of the concept of democratic constitution making, including the various theories on the subject, as well as the associated themes of popular participation, popular sovereignty, and constitutional legitimacy. The project also includes a broad examination of the literature as outlined in the works of scholars from the global north and south. Ultimately, with the guidance of the executive director, the interns working on this project will develop a basic theory of democratic constitution making that embeds its fundamental attributes without detracting from its capacity or adaptability. Now to our internships. There is the Lex Lata Internship Program, which is a research-based virtual internship for African law undergraduates within and outside Africa. The interns are tasked with conducting research and writing projects on specific aspects of international law and comparative constitutionalism in Africa. The interns make representations, write articles and reports on their projects and other related topics. Currently, the center has 6 interns who work with the center's project. Research fellowships. This is an integral part of the center's Vision 2035 knowledge sharing agenda, aimed at encouraging the progressive study and analysis of public and private international law issues relating to Africa. Currently, the center has 6 junior research fellows who are law graduates and lawyers. The center also has 1 research fellow who is a lawyer and holds a master's degree in law. These fellows are working with the center on various research projects ranging from space law to international investment arbitration. There are a lot of opportunities at Lex Lata. There's blogs and newsletters, the Lex Lata Internship Program, the research fellowships, the Lex Lata Public and International Law in African Conference. Other Lex Lata events, examples given are trainings and seminars, etc. For more information, please visit the center's website or email at careers@lexlatacenter.com. Our contact information is our website at www.lexlatacenter.com, our Instagram at Lex Lata Center, our LinkedIn at Lex Lata Center for International Law and Comparative Constitutionalism in Africa. and our email address at info@lexlatacenter.com. Thank you for your time and do enjoy the rest of the seminar. I'll now hand back to Kawia Gafar, who will take you through the rest of the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing the center, Joy. Now, you see a few questions which will pop on the screen. Please take a moment to respond, completely anonymous. They are just questions you.
Thank you, Kawiyat. And welcome once again to everyone to the Lex Lata Annual Career Seminar. It promises to be a very insightful and impactful seminar. But just before we delve into the first panel session, we have a small poll for everyone. As Kawiyat has mentioned, it's completely anonymous. So I hope everyone can see the questions. We have just about 3 minutes to fill them all out. And this is just so we have an idea of what our audience is or who our audience are. We have about 2 minutes. I encourage everyone to please fill in the form. Okay, I see that we have gotten some responses so far. Thank you to everyone that has filled the poll. If anyone hasn't filled the poll yet, I encourage you to please fill in the poll. Our panelists will be coming shortly to discuss on a related topic. In the interest of time, I would be ending the poll now. So thank you again to everyone that has contributed to the poll. Really appreciate your enthusiasm. Okay, so these are the results of the poll. Again, thank you for filling out the polls, everyone that has done so. I would now be handing back to Korea to introduce the speakers for our first panel session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. Now we'll be moving on to the first panel session. The first panel session is titled Building Practical Skills and Tools for a Successful Career in International Arbitration. This session will provide key insights into the skills, strategies needed to excel in international arbitration. We are pleased to welcome two distinguished speakers, Mr. Okoyemi Alonge and Ms. Chizaram Umba, who will be sharing their wealth of experience. This panel session will be moderated by Betty. I will now give a profile of the speakers. Mr. Okoyemi Longe is an associate at the International Arbitration Group at White and Case. He graduated with a first-class honors from University. He attended the Nigerian Law School as well as the dual qualified in Nigeria and in England and Wales. He advises governments, state-owned entities, and multinational companies on high-stake disputes in energy, infrastructure, and financial services. Okoyemi has acted in several landmark cases, including representing an international oil and gas company in one of the largest global arbitrations arising from disputes over an LNG processing facilities. representing an African state in a multi-billion-dollar arbitration over a hydro plant construction contract, advising disputes under FIDIC contracts in the Middle East and Europe, including a consortium-related ICC arbitration concerning a terminated rail construction project, and acting for Nigerian clients in gas and oil-related disputes, both before international and domestic courts. Before joining White and Case, he was an associate at Olaniwu Ajayi LP, where he represented major corporations and financial institutions in complex litigation and arbitration cases. Ms. Chizaram Umba is a commercial dispute settlement lawyer qualified to practice in Nigeria and a senior associate at ALN Nigeria, Aluko and Oyebode. She advises and represents clients in commercial litigations at both trial and appellate levels. She also represents clients in ad hoc arbitral institutions, such as the International Chamber of Commerce and the London Court of International Arbitration. I experienced cuts across disputes arising out of several factors, with a significant experience in energy and construction disputes. Ms. Umba holds a degree in international dispute settlement from the University of Geneva and the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies. Prior to joining ALN Nigeria, Aluko and Oyebode, she trained at leading La Live, Geneva, Three Crowns LLP, and ICSID, Washington, D.C. Ms. Umba is an active member of the International Arbitration Committee. She is the founder of Arbitration Podium, an initiative dedicated to showcasing the development of arbitration in Africa. She also serves as scholarships co-director at the Young ICCA and as ambassador of Swiss Arbitration in Nigeria under the Swiss Arbitration Association Ambassador Program. Thank you. Over to you, Betty.
Thank you so much, Koyat. And thank you to our lovely panelists that have so graciously accepted our invitation to speak at this panel session. I'm sure everyone is as excited as I am to learn from their wealth of experience. Thank you once again, Mr. Opeyemi Longe and Ms. Chizaram Umba. We are happy to have you. Just before I begin the panel session, I would like to inform our audience that if they have any questions, they're free to type them in the chat box. There will be a short question and answer session after the panel session. So if you have any questions for either of our panelists, they'd be more than happy to answer. So I'll be directing the questions to each panelist, but if the other panelist has something to add, then you are more than free to do so. So my first question goes to Mr. Opeyemi Longe, and it is, what motivated you to pursue a career in international arbitration, and what convinced you that it would be a success for you?
Thank you very much, Betsy. Just to check that you can hear me very clearly.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, excellent. So thank you again. I think it's I feel very pleased to be invited to have this conversation. So I hope that we would have a great moment in the next couple of minutes or so. In terms of motivation to pursue a career in international arbitration, I think it probably makes sense to say a bit of my background. Of course, I know that it's been talked about the profile read out. So I started in Nigeria. Did my undergrad, did my law school in Nigeria, and started working as a litigator in a law firm in Lagos. And at that time, obviously, I was doing a bit of a mix of litigation and arbitration. I would probably say 80-20%. So less of arbitration, more of litigation. And I go to court almost every day. A lot of the time, it's always very discouraging to go to court, especially as a junior lawyer, where you spend all your day in court. Sometimes the court doesn't sit, or you're there and then it's your turn. You're like number 10 on the course list, and it's time for you, but of course the judge is tired and says, you have to come back another day. So, but on the other side, while I was also involved in domestic arbitration in Nigeria, I found it very interesting in the sense that in terms of speed, in terms of the efficiency, and I thought, this is something that's worth exploring. And combined with the fact that at that time I was also doing some work with international law firms on some of the arbitration that they had in terms of providing local advice on some of those cases. And so when I thought about it, I said, okay, how do I do this? What needs to be done? And speaking to people, I felt it would be a great thing to do something more international, especially working for international law firms. And so I think that was more like the trajectory of, thinking of doing something, especially international. The lack of process, the discouragement of going to court. I think for me, that was the starting point. And again, working with national law firms, seeing how to do things, seeing the advocacy, the writing, it was beautiful to see. And in terms of what convinced me whether I will be successful, I think of course the jury still out whether I'm successful. The conviction is actually about the fact that I know uh, the hard work that I put in, whether as a student, was always going to be a great driving force for success. And so, again, having done 2 degrees in Nigeria and having worked in law firm for 2, 3 years, I was reasonably comfortable that I could succeed if I go out there. So I think that's where I'll stop for the moment.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Opeyemi. I hope that everybody has understood and taken away from the fact that hard work is essentially important for a success in any career, but also in pursuing international arbitration as well. My next question will go to Ms. Chizaram Mba, and it is, what steps would you say you took that shaped your career in international arbitration? Were there specific courses that you took, or were there things that you did or soft skills that you developed that helped your success in this area?
Thank you, Betty. And I would also like to echo the appreciation of my colleague Opeyemi in thanking you or appreciating you for inviting me to speak at this seminar, at this conference. You and the entire Lex Lata team. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that I'll be able to share some things that will be beneficial to the attendees. So going to your question, what steps did I take that were essentially instrumental in helping me break into international arbitration? I would just focus on one thing which I thought was quite significant, and that was obtaining my master's degree, specializing in international dispute settlement. And it came at a time when a lot of my peers were, of course, also going for their master's programs, and many of them were going for general LLMs in the Ivy League schools in the US and all. And I was tempted to also take that route because, of course, I thought that would be a very good path to success, basically. But I think I already had an understanding that I wanted to build a career in international arbitration at the point when I had graduated from my undergraduate studies. So I knew that I wanted a master's that could actually help me break into that that field or that sphere, right? And I think it was doing my master's at the university, at the MIT, it's called popularly known as the MIT, the Masters in International Dispute Settlement in Geneva. Doing my master's there was quite instrumental because it helped me to pivot from just being a Nigerian lawyer doing disputes like Opeyemi was doing before he moved over, but to just opening me up to the really international aspects of arbitration. It helped me to obtain internships I mean, you read my profile, the internships that I did, where I would say to a great extent influenced by the fact that I had taken that master's and I had been exposed to international arbitration knowledge. So yes, I would say that step I took was quite beneficial to me in breaking in.
Right, thank you for that answer. But just as a follow-up, you mentioned that, I'm sorry, Mr. Opemi, do you have something to?
Take your follow-up. Let me not disrupt the conversation.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that your breakout into international arbitration really kicked into gear after you pursued your master's at the MIT. But then my question is, how would students, for instance, I know that there are a number of students that are interested in international arbitration or undergraduates. Is there a way to get into this field without having to do your master's or before you do your master's, or is that the one route?
That's a very good question. So I was speaking based on my own experience because it was a personal thing for me. But yes, there are definitely ways to break into it without having to do a master's degree. And I would say, I mean, moot competitions are one way to do it, particularly for students. I know that there is the Williams CV's moot competitions, and I know that many Nigerian universities actually participate in it. So if you have the opportunity, if you are in a school that actually participates in this competition, it would be a great way to kind of meet other people, both renowned practitioners and students as well. But even if you don't have the opportunity to take like international moots like the William Seavis moots, there are also local moot competitions. The LCAYAN organizes one for Nigerian universities. Apart from that, I know I'm on LinkedIn and I see a lot of students who are trying to push themselves and show themselves to kind of have knowledge in that area. So I would say you should also follow people in the area that that you like their work and you want to be like, and also try and put out some content. I know it sounds cliche, right? But it's what works, right? So if you do want to break in, you would need to, and you don't want to go through the route of masters. Ultimately, you want to, number one, equip yourself with as much skill and knowledge of that area as possible using the resources you have here with you. And I've mentioned a couple of them already.
All right, thank you, Mark, for that answer, Mr. Opeyemi.
Yeah, so I was going to say I think one fundamental thing. I agree with all that Shizarama said in terms of breaking in and being successful. But I think especially thinking of speaking to students now, because I know there are a mix of different people we're talking to. I think when I saw the poll, it was shocking to me that no one really thought strong academic background was important. I mean, I imagine maybe people take that for granted. But if that's not the case, I think that would be really not right, because the truth of the matter is you need very strong academic background to actually start any of these conversations at all. And whether to get into good law firms even in Nigeria, the starting point that people look at is what's your grade in school, and how do you convince a law firm, for example, that you're a good candidate if you don't have good grades in your university degrees. I think that's really a starting point. In fact, and I will say that that's even a building block for every other thing that you would do, whether it's getting into the best schools, whether it's Ivy League, whether it's a specialized school like the one that Children went to. You don't get in there without having a good university degree. Like I went to Oxford, for example, you wouldn't get into the BCL without a first class. So, and those are the things that you need to build on if you are a student. This is the time to actually get in there, do the work. And I think when I reflect back now, I always wonder why is it that people find it difficult to get this distinction? You know, it's a 70 over 100 to get an A in a course. Why is it that difficult? And the reason why it's difficult is because people generally are not that serious in preparing for exam, in preparing for their tests and all of those things. And you would really thank your stars if you did it right now when you reflect back. So I think strong academic background is very important. Of course, the other point that people have voted for in terms of networking and mentorship, strong experience, those things also count. In fact, whether you're going to when you're going to build a network of professionals, they're also going to be looking at who is this person I'm going to mentor? Is he someone who is really self-driven? And the only way they see that, I mean, one of the ways they will see you as someone who is self-driven is if they can see you're good, you participate in more competitions, and so that's how people get interested in you. So I think that's just one thing I think I wanted to emphasize in terms of you need to pay attention to good grades if you are still a student now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Opemi. I think that was really an important addition. It's good to know that your academic performance and the extracurricular activities that you may engage in, be internships or competitions, they're not mutually exclusive. Both are equally important to achieve your goal of success in international arbitration. So my next question goes to you, Mr. Opeyemi, and it is, having worked both in Nigeria, in Nigerian law firm, and abroad, now as right-hand case, would you say that there are any major differences in international arbitration realities across both jurisdictions? And if they are, what are they?
Yeah, interesting question there. Yes, I would say there are a few major differences. Obviously, the underlying point is that you have good lawyers on both sides of the Atlantic or the divide, whether it's in Nigeria or internationally. But I think the major difference in terms of the work for international law firms and maybe Nigerian law firms would be in the size and the value of the work that both markets do. And so, and that's really because a lot of the time, the kind of cases that international law firms handle are very complex, multi-jurisdictional issues. So, for example, I'll give one example from what the profile that was read about me. So, when I joined White and Case in 2019, I was stabbed on a case that was at that time one of the largest currently in that year, which was we had a claim of more than $10 billion in dispute. And so in my firm, for example, we then had a team of more than about 50 lawyers working on that case alone. And so if you look at the terms, I'm not quite sure if, for example, there's any law firm in Nigeria that has 50 district lawyers solely focusing. So, and if you don't have that, how do you have those people just doing those cases alone? And apart from that, there was a case that had different components governed by a law, I think Western Australian law. We had, and we had different elements of those disputes in terms of the experts that had to look into different issues. We had, I'd imagine we had about 13, 14 different experts. So I think it's in terms of the value of what we do or what international law firms do make a difference. And again, obviously, when and I'm thinking professionally now. I think in terms of the realities of the culture, at least I'm speaking from my own experience as someone who worked in two different systems. I think that for junior mid-level lawyers, there's a lot more expectation. There's a lot more freedom, if I can call it that, that senior people give to you, such that you then quickly get into knowing that this is you, this is your career, this is you actually doing stuff that no one, I mean, the assumption is that when you're drafting a pleading, for example, you must put in your best, because obviously there might be the person who's reviewing it wants to get the best quality work out there. And I feel like when I compare when I was in Nigeria, for example, there's that sense of, well, I just do this. I think my supervisor will change it anyway, will make fundamental changes, which is really what I thought as a defining difference. I would hope that that has changed, and I'm sure Chizoram is there to also add our own views on that point. So those are the issues. And again, obviously, there's the point that when I say culture, I'm a Yoruba person, and I think Yoruba people who are on the call would probably agree with me or disagree, but there's this culture of difference. You defer to people who are older. And sometimes when I mean, we have smart people, junior people who have different views. And sometimes in law firms within, because of the cultural elements, when you express those views, it might come off as being arrogant or, because you're disagreeing with someone who has done it for 10, 15 years. But what I saw totally different here is that that is even encouraged, right? I, very as a junior person when I started, it was very convenient, easy for me to express my views, and people say, okay, I think it makes sense, or oh, I don't agree with that for X and X reasons. So, and you can have that debate without anybody thinking, oh, this person is just 1 year at the post call. Why is he disagreeing with me who have done this for 10 years? So I think those are some of the nuances that I see in terms of differences in terms of in practice. And there's also one other thing which I saw very early on, which is the fact that you get put out there immediately. You get put out there to speak at conferences, to deliver trainings, even as a junior person, which is something I mean, I didn't see much of that at that time when I was in Nigeria. So I think those are differences that I see in terms of culture, in terms of the sizes of the kind of work that we do. Hopefully, I know that might have been changing now because there's a lot more growth in the system. There's a lot more. I think law firms are now realizing that you need to operate at the international level, even if you're a Nigerian law firm. And so that's a way to encourage people to feel professionally fulfilled. So that's what I would say in terms of answering your question.
If I
Thank
can
you.
just add something. Yeah, in Nigeria, the culture hasn't changed much. I mean, there's still that level of deference, right? And this hierarchy, such that no matter how brilliant you are, if you say too much or you try to push an idea, you will be reminded of your place you'll be reminded of your place in the hierarchy of things, right? But apart from that, I was just going to talk on the complexity of the work that is being done because I also, I mean, although as an intern, but I worked in several jurisdictions, basically in Geneva, in London, and I also worked in the US, although it was remotely. But what I saw that cut across these three jurisdictions, vis-a-vis what we have in Nigeria, is that the sheer complexity of the work being done pushes you to have to level up in your knowledge, in your experience, and in your skill, right? The work you will probably do, the work you'll be exposed to as, say, an intern in an international law firm is not the kind of work you'll be doing as an intern in a Nigerian law firm, right? Now, of course, there are things you will definitely do that will be similar, like doing research, you understand, doing proofreading and site checking, right? But sometimes I know when I was an intern, I had to assist with a filing a filing at in an arbitration, an investment arbitration. And the sheer volume of work, the analysis, the organization of the bundles, it was really we had almost 4 interns or 5 interns just helping to analyze the and organize the exhibit, and we were working with I think there's this electronic tool or platform. I think it's iManage. I can't remember, but it was for somebody who was not even exposed. We don't even use all these electronic systems to do any filing or organize documents in Nigeria. For somebody who was not exposed to it, sometimes you can feel a bit overwhelmed, or you may feel like you are lagging behind as an African, right? When you're working with your European counterparts who have probably been exposed to these systems and this kind of work before. So that complexity is what is helpful, and that's why I mean we still have situations where some international law firms get local law firms to kind of second their associates or people just to get that kind of experience. We're seeing that kind of partnerships happening now. But yeah, that's a difference, one major difference I would say between working in an international law firm and working in a local law firm.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chidam. And just before we move to your actual question, Mr. Opemi, you mentioned the size of people on each of these cases. Like, for instance, in other jurisdictions, for instance, in London, the number of people working on a particular arbitration case would be a lot. You mentioned about having 50 people, I believe you said. But then do you think that it's because here in Nigeria, a lot of firms don't have a separate arbitration group and it's more or less merged with litigation? Do you think that's why this is the case?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just the scale. So, for example, when I was in Nigeria, and I of course, for people who know, Olaniwoye is one of the big names out there. And one of the biggest cases I worked on, which was the litigation, which was like, I would say, relatively compared to others, was the one that had like document heavy kind of thing. But I could say that I knew every of the documents. I mean, maybe it will probably be maximum of 100 or 200 documents, right? But on this case that I was just talking about, we have millions of documents because you're going to be looking through. So this was a facility that was built, which cost, I think, in excess of.
Sorry, I don't think we can hear you anymore. Or is it just me?
Yeah, no, it's not. The sound went off for a minute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, my apologies. So I don't know where you last heard the conversation, but I was just talking about. So let
Well, I
me
just
double
wanted
check.
to remind you, the last thing that we heard was you mentioned it's because of the scale, for instance, having over sometimes a million documents and then having
Exactly,
to,
yeah.
that's why.
So you have like tons of documents to look at. You have so this was a project where we had delays on the project and cost overrun. And this was a project where they were building different components of the plan across different parts of the world. In China, some were built in China, some were built in Thailand, and then were then moved into the location to be installed. So you have different issues to deal with. You have different experts looking, for example, on delay, experts looking, for example, on quality issues. So it's not just about the fact that law firms in Nigeria don't have a specialized dispute team. And I think actually they do have now. Like, of course, it might mean that you may be working on more than one case, but for this senior law firm, top tier law firms like Aluko, like Olaniwada, like Templar, they do have specialized teams. Of course, it may be that you still do some bit of work outside of that team, but in a way, you do 90% of the work. So I wouldn't say it's just because of that. I would say it's really in the volume, in the complexity of the case you're dealing with. That's why you have more people to do it. So that's really the reality of it.
All right, thank you. Before I proceed to ask my next question to Ms. Chizaram, I would just like to again encourage our audience to drop their questions in the chat box. We will soon be moving to the question and answer session. So Ms. Chizaram, my question for you is, what were some mistakes you would say you made at the start of your career in international arbitrations, and how do you suggest that early starters avoid those mistakes?
Mistakes I made when starting out. Well, actually, I don't have any regrets. So I can't really point at any singular act that I would say, oh, this was a mistake I made. Because I mean, so far, my career has taken the direction that I have intentionally tried to build. So it simply means that any mistake I might have made was not so significant as to take me on a detour. So it's not a mistake worth mentioning. But would I say, one thing I wish I did more, particularly when I was in university or when I was in school, was to participate more in written and oral advocacy programs. I know that I had zero interest in anything advocacy throughout my university days, and my first participation in anything advocacy was after I was called to bar. In fact, my first internship was after my final year, so I had nothing on my CV, right? If not that Banwan Igodalo decided to take a chance on me. It was a major miracle. So and so that's just I was just lucky that I got that internship and all. But I wish I did participate more in moots competition because my classmates and colleagues actually did. I feel that that would have prepared me more, right, for life going forward, because now I'm a full disputes practitioner. But then again, I wouldn't say it had such a significant impact, because what I did was that I made up for it once immediately I graduated. So the first 3 years after I graduated from law school, from university and law school, I found that I was very active with moot competition. I participated in the LCAYEN moot competition under SP Ajibade. I participated at the LCAYEN moot competition with Alex. I also participated again with Alex for another session, another what's it called, another competition, but not I didn't come out as a participant, but I just kind of helped at the background. So yeah, I kind of made up for that lag that I missed out in my university days. So I would just encourage current students that if you do have the opportunity, it doesn't have to be particularly arbitration related, but if you have any opportunity, even if it's just a simple debate that you can organize or you can do to just improve your both written, right, and oral advocacy skills, I would say please take advantage of that opportunity, particularly for those who may be shy and those who don't feel like they can hold their own when they speak. So take advantage of those opportunities because they will come in handy in your career.
Right, thank you so much for that answer. I'm sure it really does help a lot of people in the audience. Mr. Opemi, the next question that I have for you is more practical, and I would also invite Ms. Chizaram to respond if she has anything to add. But what is your advice for structuring cover letters and CVs when applying for, be it internships or job applications, or what do you think these law firms want to see?
Cover letters, I think, so the starting point is follow the instructions. So if the instruction says not more than 500 words or not more than 10 words, do not go above it. So if I'm reading an equivalent letter or an application from someone who has refused to follow the rules, that's a minus. But that's really fundamental. It looks simple, but that's really important. But when you talk about what they want to see, a lot of the time I think people make the mistake of rewriting their CV, like say, oh, I went to university, I had the first class, I was this, I was that. That's not what cover letters are meant to do. Cover letters are meant to really get them to know you, even though they have seen your CV. So, for example, and of course, cover letters are also meant to actually get to know how well you know the firm. So, for example, if you apply to a law firm like White and Case, I would expect you to talk about, okay, what was your interest in? Why did you want to do commercial law, for example? What motivated you to do that? That's an information that will not be on your CV most likely, right? I would want you to talk, for example, about what you know about White and Case, or for example, I would want you to talk about what previous program have you attended that White and Case, run? So, for example, have you done any of the internships or any of the virtual internships? Or for example, I want to talk about who have you met at White and Case? What do they say is the culture? So that's some of the things that you want to talk about when you're writing your cover letters. For example, and again, speaking about the knowledge, I mean, your knowledge of the firm, you will want to talk about. So if there's any interesting project, or if there's any interesting matter they've been involved in on that, and law firms do this a lot. They put all of the big things on their websites, so it's not a secret. Like you can always find that information. The problem with people when they do cover letters is they do a very generic cover letter. So you have someone who writes and says, "Oh, I like this firm because it's a very international law firm." Every other law firm says they're international, right? So there's nothing you're telling that is different. But I want someone who, for example, has done his or his her homework. And the way you do that is that you actually reach out. It's now very easy these days. The LinkedIn is there. You can easily message someone randomly from nowhere who you've not met before. And I can tell you, people are genuinely willing to assist. Of course, not people who write and say, hi, she's around, and then they stop at that. Excuse me? Like, please go to why are you messaging she's around? Hi, I'm this person, this is what I want. I'll be grateful if you could give me some time to discuss it. I can assure you, people would be willing to talk and come out conversation too. I digress. But that's the point, right? There's a way you can actually reach out to get those information and make your application stronger because you can then talk about, oh, in fact, it's interesting because I discovered with this person and I was impressed by the kind of work, the opportunities that junior people will get to do on the job. And also tell me what you will be adding, what value you'll be adding to the firm. Of course, you might say, oh, I'm a very junior person. What can I add? Of course, you can add a lot because, and that's how you can translate your background. Like, if you're a first class person, you can use that to tell a story about the quality that you can bring to the team. If you're a muta, for example, you can talk about the fact that being successful meant you had organization skills. Being successful meant you could actually um, support teams. And so those are the ways that you can use the information in your CV without necessarily regurgitating them to make your application stronger. So it's and again you have to also think about um, what team you are applying for. There are different cover letters. I mean, if you're doing, for example, a cover letter for an internship, it will be different for if you're doing a cover letter for a training contract, or if you're doing a cover letter for a lateral role as an associate to a law firm. So, for example, when I did mine, I would just do a very short, 5 lines, or I'll say 3 or 4 paragraphs, because I was applying for an associate role. So I didn't have to go into too much information, because the guy who was reading my email probably only had like 1 minute to get interested, or less than that. So you have to be aware of who are you writing to, what kind of application are you making, and that will determine the content of your application. But what's important is, and again, I should say this before I forget, typos. No, you cannot write a 1 page application and then you can see typos already. I mean, come on. I think it pisses people off, at least on this side of the Atlantic. I cannot stand people writing a very short application and you can already see errors there. I mean, people just won't be impressed. And that's the way you do it. You can write it, get people to look over it, get people to read it. And so it's really about you need to put in the effort. It might be a 200-word application. Like, for example, when I applied to do a master's degree, Oxford would ask you to do not more than 300 words or not more than 150 words. So short, so that you need to be saying what's important. And you need to get people to check it. Is it convincing? Does it make sense? So I think that's where I was talking about. I know Chizaram is itching to say more
Funny
things.
enough, I was I wasn't. I was just agreeing with you actually, because most of the things you said are absolutely apt. I've had the chance to review some applications, and I mean sometimes what I see is just is funny. And the point you made about reaching out to people is important, but of course, not just reaching out and saying hi and expecting the person to leave whatever the person is doing and say hi back. Why? You understand? But I think what I wanted to just emphasize, two things I wanted to emphasize is particularly for students and people who are just maybe you're just leaving school or you're just trying to break in, and maybe you don't feel like you have any value to offer or to communicate. Basically, I think it's important that you leverage on what you do have, right? So if you've never done any research in arbitration, but you've done research in some other kind of area, right? It's all about how you sell yourself. So what you would want to say in your cover letter is, I have this, I did this, but I believe that I can be able to use this in my work, in the work I'll be doing here, because I've developed these research analytical skills from this work I have done, right? So it's what you're going to be doing is just try as much as possible to sell yourself, right? Then secondly, knowing about the company or where you're applying, the firm you're applying to, right? It's also not enough to just go to the website and just pick out a line or and say, oh, you are the one of the most prestigious, you are a GAR 30 law firm, you have reputable practitioners, you have a wealth of skill and experience and all that, right? That is like obvious knowledge, right? So what you want to do when you go to the firm's website, you want to look for news, what they have been doing recently, right? The things that they have been doing that are interesting to you, and you want to, I mean, tap into that and say, I'm interested in this kind of work, and I know that you have done this. The firm is very active in this area, and this is something that I would also like to do. So, I believe I can add value to the team in this area, or something like that, right? So don't just copy paste or put a generic message, but um, take the information you need from whatever you see and make it personal, why it's interesting to you, and then put it in. So these two things, in addition to what Opeyemi has said, will be beneficial.
Thank you very much. That was really good to the part about looking for something that they've done news that they've put out or something that they've published, and I would personally take that one on. Look, so we've come to the end of the panel session proper, but we also have some questions in the chat box, so I will just be reading them out. The first one I think goes to Mr. Opeyemi, and it says, does White and Case or other international law firms offer undergraduate internships to Nigerian students studying in Nigeria?
That's tricky. I think what I know is there's always the internships for undergrads, but most of the people who come in are UK students, and the reason being that it's always a very short 2 weeks internship. And so if you're from overseas, then it becomes difficult because there's a visa process, and so that's really impractical. And what I know that firms now do is actually because we do recognize that there's talent all over the place. And so there's the virtual internship that's open. Um, Again, obviously, there's that can be very important because a lot of the time, the work you do are things that you can talk about. If, for example, you down the line you want to apply for a training contract, for people who are not familiar with training contract process, it's essentially the route to qualifying as a solicitor in the UK. So if you finish a degree, then the training contract for 2 years, and then you're admitted to practice law here. So that's one option. So I mean, I think the short answer is for intensives, maybe not, but you can do a much longer 6 months, especially if you finish a degree. You can do that also if you finish a master's. Those are opportunities that are open for most law firms. I think, of course, Chidera talked about 3 crowns. I think they're very big on that. White and Case, we also do offer internships in international arbitration, but that's primarily done from our Paris office. I know all of them like Linklaters and a few others in the city that actually offer internships. But I think there's so much opportunity out there. You just need to look at it and see what works for you. Even if you can't go in, I mean, I think obviously it's very ambitious to think about going out there to do an internship in an international law firm. There's so many great firms in Nigeria where you can do stuff. And like you said, many of them, I mean, for example, I for one never had the opportunity to do an internship in a law firm all through my degree time. And so today, you cannot have an excuse for not going somewhere. Even if it's not the big law firms, there are law firms around your communities where you're on holiday, you can go there, do volunteer with them then, and that would enrich your knowledge of the law and actually shape what you want to do going forward. So that's a long way of answering a very short question.
Thank you very much. The next question, someone asked to clarify, but I think that has already been answered. The competition is LCA, and it happens yearly. I believe there's currently one going on now. Just in case anybody is interested in that. The next question is, and I think it's derived from Miss Chizaram, Miss Sina. She went to the MIS, but I also invite Mr. Opeyemi to contribute as well. For a master's program in international dispute resolution, between Queen Mary and the MIS, which institution is better to start a career in international arbitration?
You're asking someone that went to the meets. I don't know why you really that question is not it's not for me because I would definitely give a biased answer, right? But I would say that both programs are very extremely good programs. But I think what should guide your decision, not just between Queen Mary and the meets, but any other specialized master's program you want to do, what should really guide your decision is particularly what jurisdiction do you want to kind of, get further experience from, right? So if you are looking to maybe break into the London markets, I would definitely advise that you go for Queen Mary, right? But the meets is also, of course, you can break into the London market with the meets, but of course, but mostly Paris, getting experience from places like Paris. I know Germany as well, and more of other areas of Europe, right? Apart from the UK. So these are the considerations that you want to look at. But both programs are extremely good. And if you're able to get into any of them, then I mean that's already a win on your part, and then you can make that decision.
Yes,
Just one thing to
Mr.
add to what Shiram said. I agree with her completely, but I think that what's even more important is, and I think she's actually said it, is what you aim to get out of it. So a lot of the time people go in because others are doing it, right? Oh, I want to go to Harvard because many people are going to Harvard. I want to go to Oxford because oh, it's a top-notch university. But really, it's a 10-month, 12 months program. And so a lot of the time you need to be deliberate. What do I want to do in the next 12 months? So the moment you get in, you already know, okay, this is what I want to do once I finish. And that would influence how you structure your things. That would influence you in terms of reaching out to people very early on. That would influence you in the kind of courses that you take. That would influence the type of networking event you attend. And so for example, in my own case, I went to Oxford because I was lucky to be offered a place. But I knew what I wanted to do 12 months after. And so from the very moment I got in, I was already going for events in London. I would travel all the way from Oxford to come attend law firm events. And so I was able to meet people who were able to tell me their experiences of how they got in. And then those people were useful when I started making my application. So I think that's really very important. What you want to get in, I mean, meet Queen Mary, these are great schools. But you've had people who went to, any of those schools and clearly they don't make the best use of it. So I think it's for you, it's what you want. It's not always going to be about the institution, ultimately.
All right, thank you. I'll be taking two more questions. We're actually a little over time, but the same person that asked this question has asked a follow-up question, and it is beg your pardon, is it easy to get scholarship straight from law school for the MITs, or is it advisable to work first before applying for the MITs?
So you're talking about getting admission or scholarship now. I'm not really sure. Scholarship, right? Well, I think it's a two-way, I mean, it's a two-level question. First, you have to get the admission, and then you can now, before you get the scholarship, right? So I'll address the admission part. It is preferable to have some kind of experience before applying for the MIT. Your chances of getting into the MITs are higher if you have some kind of experience. Maybe you have up to 3 years of experience or so, and you have some familiarity with arbitration, your chances are higher, right? So if you are able to get the admission, then of course you would apply for a scholarship while you're applying for admission. But yes, you do. There are several scholarship opportunities at the MITs, including the Young ICA scholarship. I'm mentioning the Young ICA scholarship because I am scholarships co-director for Young ICA. So and I also participated in the meet, although I was not the recipient of the Young ICA scholarship at my time, but it is something that we offer annually. And it's open. I think there's an essay you need to write. You may need to go to the meet website and look at the requirements, and then a selection is made, and it's a full tuition scholarship. But apart from that, I know that Three Crowns also has a full tuition scholarship for the meets. The meet itself also provides its own funding, some level of funding, and La Live Geneva also provides a full tuition scholarship for the meets. So there are several options available for scholarships to attend the meets.
Nice, thank you. I think that was really sufficient an answer. The final question is, how do you suggest we stand out when we get to these high-ranking big law firms? Well, what is your tip for how to, getting in is one thing, but standing out and proving yourself is another thing. So what advice would you give to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, so standing out, I think just like any other place, I think there's always the thing about be yourself, but you need to be hardworking. I think excellence is really the minimum. Once you excel, you can be certain that people will notice. And like I said, I think one of the things that that people might struggle with is when you're transitioning from a Nigerian law firm where there's you defer to senior people, where you're on a call, it's the senior people that talk, and you just bury your head. I think that's a completely different mindset that you need to take into those places. And I supervise trainees, and these are people who are training to become lawyers. And I tell my trainee every time that if I get on a call with you and there's something in your mind that you want to say, please say it. And it's very important because people notice when you have a junior person on a call who makes an interesting contribution. They're interested in you. Unlike if Shizram is on a call and she speaks, I know, of course, she's been doing this for years. So I take that for a given. But if someone is just a new lawyer, like a junior lawyer, comes and makes a very interesting contribution, I'm interested in that person's right away. So that's one way. And I think, of course, there's a difference between people talking and people not actually doing the work. And you will get caught out very quickly because we see, and that's the same thing everywhere, whether in Nigeria or here. There are people who are very good at saying things, but when it comes to actually producing the quality work, they falter. So I think you have to level up on both bases. Good work is very important, and one thing that is very, very it's the basic. You cannot give excuses for failing to meet deadlines. You cannot give excuses for failing to do good work. And again, that's another thing I think which I need to emphasize is that people would not, unlike Nigeria, I mean, you can tell people off and say, this is nonsense, you've done rubbish. But people are a bit, at least even for an English country, people are a bit polite, but it just means that when you don't do good work, then they just start drifting away from you. And no one wants a liability on their team. So I think the summary of it is you need to do good work and you need to be open to make contributions. Do not keep quiet when you're in a room or when you're attending a meeting. I mean, I think speak up. And then that's actually also very important, even when you're doing your master's program. If you're in a class, please talk. It's not like Nigeria where the lecturer just comes and then reads out his note, and that's the end of the class. You contribute, and when you contribute, your professors will notice you. They will see if there are opportunities for you to take advantage, or they would point your attention to it. But if you're in a class and you don't talk, they don't notice you. And so those are things that you need to be aware of to stand out. Of course, I think you don't have to overdo it. Like we know people overdo things, and ultimately, like I said, if you don't back it up, they get caught out very quickly.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And that brings us to the end of this first.
Sorry, before you end, Betty, I just wanted to make a very short contribution to that. I would say that if one had to choose between doing good work and making contributions to stand out, as a young lawyer, I would say start first by doing good work, because as Opeyemi had already mentioned, there's no point getting the attention of people by being vocal, and then when you are asked to deliver on an opinion or something or a draft, it's not something that anyone can use, or there's an overhaul in whatever you bring in. So I think you should focus a lot more attention on getting the substantive part correctly and developing that grit and that ability to analyze, to research, and to provide correct, accurate opinions. And you can start you don't have to wait until you have gotten into a law firm to do that. You can actually start right now as students. You can start working on that. How do you do that? You can start actually writing opinions or articles rather, and sharing, not even without you needing to publish it, share it with a lecturer, with a professor, or share it with a senior colleague, and ask them to actually read it and tell them to give you their own honest review of the issue and whether you really addressed it, and let them pick out, help you criticize it basically. That way you're trying to develop your analytical skills, your research skills as well, right? And your writing skills. So I believe that if you're able to build that ability to, do those, to research, to analyze, right? And to write without typographical errors. By the time you get into the law firm and you are faced with that kind of work, you will more easily deliver on it. And I promise you, the reward for good work is more work. So if people are calling you to give you more work, that means it's good. But if you do work for somebody and you see that you're not really getting more work again, be concerned. There's a problem, right? So yeah, that's it. More of hard work and good work.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this panel session. It has really, really definitely been insightful. I know that I did enjoy it and I learned a lot. So thank you once again to our wonderful panel speakers. And thank you for honoring our invitation to speak to our audience.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
Right, moving on to the next thing on our agenda. Right before I introduce the speakers for the second panel session, I'm going to launch another quick poll. And I believe everyone can see it now on their screens. I would invite everyone to please fill in the poll. It borders largely on what we'll be discussing in the second panel session. It's just 3 questions, a quick poll. I would just give us about a minute or two to do this before I share the results, and then we proceed with the second panel session. Thank you to everyone that has filled. I see that we have a number of responses now. Just a few seconds left for the poll to be up. Okay. Again, thank you to everyone that has filled the poll. I would end it now and then share the results so that our panelists, so everyone can have an idea of the audience that we currently have. Okay, these are the results of the poll. A lot more people think that London is the international arbitration hub. I assume that they would have their reasons for that, but our panelists would shed more light on whether that's the case and how Nigeria can top that. Okay. That brings us to the end of this. Before I hand over back to our host for this event, Career, I would like everyone to please look to the chat box. One of our panelists has dropped material, and I believe that everyone should check it out. It would be really impactful and educative. So Career, over to you to introduce the next set of panelists.
Thank you very much, Betty. A huge thank you to Mr. Longe and Miss Umba for that insightful session. I really, really learned a lot. We will now be moving on to the second panel session, and it is titled, Can Nigeria Become the Next International Arbitration Hub? Analyzing the impact of the Arbitration and Mediation Act of 2023. For this session, our distinguished speakers will be Ms. Falake Sadiq and Mr. Tohib Amuda, and Chidera Okoro will be moderating this session. As usual, I will give you a profile of each of the speakers. So, Ms. Falake Sadiq is a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. She is currently the Group Counsel at Westfield Energy Resources. She is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and a member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators. She has worked in different top-tier law firms and advised different local and international corporations on project finance, mergers and acquisitions, corporate governance, compliance, dispute resolution, and other commercial matters. She has also worked in the public and private sectors, heading legal departments, advising boards and other stakeholders on companies' secretarial and governance matters. Ms. Sadiq regularly sits as an arbitrator and conducts arbitration training. She was the recipient of the African Arbitration Academy Scholarship and a member of the drafting committee for the Model Bilateral Treaty of African States, which won a global arbitration review. She has also been actively involved in drafting an amendment of Lagos state laws. She obtained her LLB from the University of Lagos and an LLM with distinction in international commercial law from Robert Gordon University, Aberdeen, Scotland, where she received the Thomson Reuters Prize for all best round performance. She has also won the Esquire Nigerian Legal Rising Award, Top 40 Under 40 Lawyers, and the Esquire Nigerian Legal Award, Best In-House Counsel in Shipping and Transport categories. Over the years, she has received recognition and a number of accolades for the work she has done. Ms. Falake has a key interest in resolution of technology disputes, data privacy, and cybersecurity. The second distinguished speaker is Mr. Tohib Amuda. Mr. Amuda is an associate at Alukwan Oyebode. He is a qualified lawyer with cognate experience in international arbitration and commercial litigations. He holds a Master of Laws, LLM, in international business law with distinction from the University of Law in London, UK. Mr. Tohib's legal practice has seen him in a wide array of commercial and investment arbitrations under the rules of ICSID, LCIA, ICC, DIAC, AAA, ICDR, RCICAL, as both counsel and tribunal secretaries. Additionally, he has represented clients in litigation before Nigeria's superior courts. He has also assisted in litigation in courts in England and in Wales. Mr. Tohib frequently coaches mooting teams in arbitration-focused competitions, such as the VSMOOTs. He is an executive committee member of the Lagos Court of Arbitration Young Arbitrators Network. He is also the founder of ADR Discourse, which is an organization dedicated to educating participants on alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, including arbitration and mediation. Mr. Tohib was recognized as the Young Arbitration Practitioner of the Year at the African Arbitration Awards held at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in September 2024. This recognition celebrates remarkable contributions to arbitration by practitioners under the age of 40. And this panel session will be hosted by Chidera. So over to you, Chidera. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Korea, for the brilliant introduction. I also want to thank Betty Eliku for the first panel session. It was truly an incredible one. And I'm certain that with the caliber of lawyers we have for this second session, that it's going to be even better. Thank you so much, Mr. Amuda and Ms. Sadiq, for accepting our invitation. And I hope that the questions would be well received. So I will begin by giving a brief introduction to this panel session. We will be discussing the Arbitration and Mediation Act. And our first question is going to be sent to Ms. Sadiq. So we're all aware about the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 2004 that preceded the Arbitration and Mediation Act of 2023. And because of its several institutional and structural problems, it was modified and replaced by the Arbitration and Mediation Act of 2023. So, Ms. Sadiq, I would just like to ask, what were the problems of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act that were resolved by the Arbitration and Mediation Act? And what are the key innovations that were brought in by the Arbitration and Mediation Act?
Okay, thank you, Chidera. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do, Ms. Sadiq.
Okay. I didn't hear everything you just said. You were breaking for a bit there. Do you mind repeating the?
Yes, of course. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, so I stated that there were several problems with the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 2004, which the
Yeah.
new Arbitration and Mediation Act. My apologies. Is there someone speaking? So I was stating that there were problems with the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 2004 that the Arbitration and Mediation Act of 2023 sought to resolve. So I was asking if you could help us address those issues that were resolved by the Arbitration and Mediation Act, as well as any key innovations that were brought up by the Arbitration and Mediation Act.
Hi, Falake. Hi, Chidera. Can you hear me?
Apologies. Yes, I can.
I
Can you
think
hear
there's
me?
a network issue with I don't know if Falake is still on the call. Yeah. Hi, Falake.
Yes,
Can you hear
I'm
Chidera?
here. I think something might be going on with my network.
Yes, I believe she's just
Can you
asking
hear me clearly?
the key innovations that the AMA has introduced over the ACA of 1988, basically.
Okay. Yes. Apologies. I think I got disconnected there, but I think the network is back. Okay. So thank you, first and foremost. Thank you for putting this together. And okay. Thank you for putting this together. And very well done to everybody that has been involved with the organization of this event. I mean, when I got the invite way back in February, I was surprised that I was getting an invite for an event in July. How much planning has gone into this? Yeah, so let's discuss the Arbitration and Mediation Act, the AMA. So I wouldn't say that the ACA, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, it was a bad law per se, but considering when it was enacted,
My apologies to everyone. It appears that Ms. Sadiq was knocked off the call.
Yes, but it looks like she's back on, but I think she's
Okay.
still trying to connect to our video and audio. Probably
Okay.
it's quite a bad network issue. But yeah, she's back now.
yes, I think what I would just do is maybe put off my video. That might help with the connection. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, that might work.
Yeah, okay. So I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I was just saying that the Arbitration and Conciliation Act wasn't bad law. I mean, I believe where a number of the students are Unilag students, right? And you know how Dr. Sani says, I don't know if some of you have taken his tax law class, and you know how he says good law or bad law. It wasn't a bad law. It was just a law that was a bit outdated. So what the AMA, the Arbitration and Mediation Act, has tried to do is to modernize um, the law a little bit more. So, for example, it states clearly now that arbitration agreements, can be found in electronic means, via electronic means, So meaning an arbitration agreement that is maybe contained in an email is valid, which is just bringing that in line with modern times. Another innovative provision is the emergency arbitration provision. So essentially, it now has the AMA provides that where there is an urgent matter to be dealt with, and the arbitration panel has not yet been constituted, an emergency arbitrator can be appointed to deal with that emergency urgent matter. So essentially, that's because we tend sometimes to underestimate how the how long the process of commencing arbitration takes, the writing to parties. Meanwhile, a dispute might have happened and something needs to be done to either protect the rest or, something urgent has come up. And sometimes the parties' hands are tied really because they have to wait for the process of appointing the arbitrators, or go to court. But with the emergency arbitration provisions, that can expedite things. And the provisions are pretty robust. The emergency arbitrator must be is appointed within 2 days, and then the other parties are notified before the end of the day. So they're really robust provisions that help hasten things along and make the law a bit more modern and in tune with what's happening worldwide. Another thing I would say is that I find particularly interesting is it abolishes Section 61 and 62 abolishes the tort of maintenance and championship for arbitration, thereby legitimizing third-party funding and improving access to justice. So what that means is, I remember back in the days when third party was just something that was discussed at conferences and something cool that was done in other jurisdictions. The issue was, I remember sitting somewhere and someone saying, oh, it can never work here because of champity laws. And the Act now expressly abolishes that sort of maintenance and champity as it relates to arbitration, which essentially means that parties can seek funding, or parties that would, because one of the things that you hear is that arbitration is expensive, right? So where a party under normal circumstance would not have access to funding and thereby would have no or limited access to arbitration. With third-party funding, they can seek funding elsewhere, and then that would help them gain access to arbitration. Another thing is the award review tribunal. Now, this is pretty novel. I remember a while back, I think maybe just one other organization in America has such a thing embedded in its law. So with this award review tribunal, which is essentially contained the robust provisions, there are robust provisions starting from Section 56 of the AMA. What it is that where parties are dissatisfied, they can elect from the beginning that instead of going to court, right, to air their grievances as it relates to an award, they will take that grievance to an award review tribunal. And that award review tribunal will look at the award given by the other tribunal and then essentially do what the court will have done, right? And it is something that strengthens one of the advantages of arbitration, party autonomy, right? It's not a mandatory provision in any way, shape, or form. The parties have to elect. So that means the parties are aware and they feel that this is something that will benefit them. So instead of going to court first, there's the award review tribunal. There are provisions for consolidation and joinder now. I believe that's found in section 39 and 40 of the AMA that allows multi-party arbitration. Because prior to that, the question was always, how there were no provisions in the ACA, but now there are direct provisions allowing for joinder and consolidation of parties. So essentially, that means that an interested party or an affected party can be made part of the arbitration process from start, as opposed to waiting for the award to be concluded and then you find a way to include the person or try and enforce against someone that wasn't part of the arbitration to start with. So you can join and consolidate matters from start now, thanks to the AMA. I think there's a few provisions, novel provisions contained in the AMA. I hope you have heard most of or all of what I've said and my network has been okay. Okay.
Yes, your network has been great. We've heard you very clearly. So I just have a few follow-up questions for clarity's sake for the people listening. So first of all, you spoke about how, the AMA is more or less a better law than the ACA, and it's more or less modifying its provisions to fit the new legal atmosphere at this point in time. So what I would like to ask first is, what about conciliation? Because I don't know if the AMA has provisions for conciliation, or if the ACA would still apply to conciliation, or if now conciliation is an unregulated means of dispute resolution in Nigeria. But considering that, does that mean that the conciliation in Nigeria is still left in 2004, more or less, when it comes to regulation?
Okay. So the ACA, obviously the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, had provisions relating to conciliation. But in practice, when it comes to commercial disputes, what would usually be used by parties would be arbitration and mediation, right? Conciliation, even by its definition, is something, if I was to more or less provide a hierarchy of dispute resolution mechanisms using their method of enforcement, how enforceable the award or the judgment would be. It would be obviously courts, arbitration, mediation, negotiation, and conciliation really are on this kind of the same level and really involves parties using their best will. Right. So conciliation, what the AMA has done is to bring our law, our substantive law, more in line with what is actually used in practice, right? Which is mediation and arbitration. Conciliation really determines on the goodwill of parties, and it's not something that was really used commercially. I certainly have never heard of anybody using the conciliation part of the ACA. We all just used to focus on the arbitration. So I think what the AMA has now done is to make arbitration and mediation, which is the method of dispute resolution methods that are prevalent, given it has given it the relevance and provided it with the necessary legal framework, right? And left conciliation more or less to the parties. So it's not like you can't use conciliation or negotiation, but it's now more or less left to the parties to decide how they want to proceed with that.
Okay,
Chidera,
thank you very much. Yeah.
just to quickly also just pitch in before you move on. First of all, thank you very much for having me, and also to Lex Lata for having me. Just on that particular question, I think Folake is right, and what the act has done now is to merge conciliation, right, with mediation. And why do I say that? So if you go to section 91, I believe, of the Arbitration and Mediation Act, right, that is the interpretation section. Just to make it clear for us, right, it defines mediation to also include conciliation, right? So it says mediation means a process, whether referred to by the expression mediation, conciliation, or an expression of similar imports, where parties request a third person, the mediator, to assist them in their attempt to reach an amicable settlement of the dispute, right, arising from or out of other contractual or legal relationship. Right. So what it means is that conciliation now has now been merged under, mediation. So in any event, if you have a clause, right, dispute resolution clause in some instances, multi-tier dispute resolution clause, whereby it says, oh, you have negotiation first. Some people then put conciliation, some people put mediation, right, and then before arbitration, right. It means the process that will apply to the mediation process under the AMA will also typically apply to the conciliation process. And that means in terms of appointment, and other things like that, right? So that's basically how it makes it work, because there are some instances where you have conciliation processes, right? And then you have mediation processes. But now, the AMA has typically merged everything under one into mediation, right?
That's actually excellent, Mr. Muda, because that's in line with the question I do have for you. So do you believe that the unification of arbitration and mediation, the regulation of arbitration and mediation into a single act actually contributes to the efficiency or to the resolution of dispute resolution in Nigeria, of commercial dispute resolution in particular?
Yes, thank you very much once again to Lex Lata for having me. And I mean, absolutely. One of the things that we've seen so far in terms of international dispute resolution, commercial dispute resolution now, and which is advisable, is having these, multi-tier dispute resolution clauses, which is something I said earlier. And why is that advisable? Is because typically one of the campaigns for arbitration is that, oh, arbitration is cheap, fast and things like that. But what we've seen in recent times and in practice is that while arbitration can be said to be, I wouldn't say cheap, right? So then having this multi-tiered dispute resolution clauses can then, try to resolve the dispute before we now move into the substance of arbitration, right? So I mean, it probably the sense of it being cheap, right, can be, the effectiveness in terms of timing that a dispute is being resolved, unlike a typical litigation in the Nigerian courts, right, or even internationally, right? So having the process under being merged, it's for efficiency, so that you have your negotiation, and if you're able to resolve your dispute, writing letters to each other, typically sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You're also able to explore mediation process, which now has a framework. And as I said earlier, that conciliation has now been merged under, mediation. And then before you now go to arbitration, right? Where the tribunal now issues an award. Now, one of the things that the AMA has done again now is to recognize the Singapore Convention, right? Now, what does that mean? There is now a Singapore Convention on the Enforcement of Mediated Settlements, right? Now, that now has a similar tone with the New York Convention, right? The New York Convention, as you may know, applies to the enforcement of arbitral awards, right? Both nationally, I mean internationally, basically. The AMA governs nationally, and of course, court also applies New York Convention. Right. So, I mean, there is now a Singapore Convention that also now applies typically with a binding effect to what they call mediated settlement. So that's also some of the initiatives that the AMA has introduced, and Nigeria has signed the Singapore Convention, which means we are now a party. So using mediation is encouraging, and probably that's something that we try to see growing now. If parties are saying, "Oh, we feel arbitration is expensive," I'm an arbitration practitioner, right? I also do mediation. So I advise, users to still use arbitration, right? So I won't push my market away to say, okay, mediation or something, right? So, I mean, I'm also a mediator, but that's what we are seeing now. And there is now, a regulation or, a jurisprudence for both processes now, basically.
Hey, so just before, as a follow-up to that question, so I presume that based on what you've said, you prefer multi-tier dispute resolution clauses, yes? You think that's a very viable means of resolution. So my question is, considering the fact that, in the Nigerian jurisprudence, there's a very high likelihood, I've heard of this, that people bring a litigation mindset to arbitration. And that means that even when there's not any particular reason to apply for the award to be set aside or even reviewed, they tend to apply for that. So I recently heard of a case in which they spent 6 months in arbitration, and now they've been in court for 3 years, one party is trying to set aside the award. So wouldn't having a multi-tier dispute resolution clause that typically requires you to spend perhaps 30 days in negotiation, 60 days in mediation before even going to arbitration, when the parties already have such a serious dispute that likely would not be settled by mediation, wouldn't that already extend the amount of time that the parties are already going to spend on arbitration and eventually litigation?
No, in contract, and this is why when drafting your contract, you have to be very careful and meticulous. In drafting of the contract, typically you provide the time for each processes to be expended, right? For instance, you see negotiation, if parties are unable to negotiate or to resolve the dispute within 30 days, right? And same also applies to mediation. So it's about specifying the time. And actually now, there are clauses now, dispute resolution clauses that now recognizes that, you should also specify time for arbitration. In some instances, it works, right? But that's based on the agreement of the parties. It specifies the time that the arbitrator should also release an award, right? So time per se, as long as you're able to specify it in your agreement, right? And as long as you're able to move forward with your matter, right? In terms of appointment, in terms of nomination of the arbitrator, in terms of trying to reach out, it depends on the parties to see how they want to push their dispute resolution. Right. So I don't see time being a factor as long as you specify time in your dispute resolution clause. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So for Ms. Folake, before we move to a new question, I would just like to ask you something based on the award review tribunal that you brought up. So similar to what I asked Mr. Muda, considering the fact that Nigerians bring a litigation mindset to arbitration, would the award review tribunal having to go there before, I know it's not compulsory, the parties elect for it, but if the parties elect for that and choose to use that, and then afterwards still head on to court, does that not extend the amount of time that the parties spend in trying to resolve the dispute? And also considering the fact that one of the very attractive features of arbitration is the bindingness of the award. You can't appeal it typically. The only way to more or less get rid of it is by setting aside the award. Do you think that affects one of the attractive features of arbitration, the award review tribunal?
Actually, don't. I don't think it affects it negatively in the sense that It actually encourages one of the principles of arbitration, which is party autonomy. The parties have come together. It's not something that is a compulsory provision. You can go the normal route of going to court to set aside an award, but the parties, the act more or less allows the parties to say, oh, we believe in the process of arbitration. Yes, we have an issue with the initial award, but before we get tied into the court system, let's give it one more shot. Now, I was reading earlier a write-up by Bodrick Bozimo and co, in which they did a survey of how long disputes take in court. I'm just trying to pull that up, right? And I think it was, for some, it went up to about 4 years, right? Now, it's impossible, but where the parties, can you hear me? Because
I can. I believe everyone else
can you
can.
hear me? We're frozen for a bit.
Yes, I can hear you. You're very clear.
Okay, great. So I mean, when you have when you're trying to set aside an award and it's taking up to 4 years, and then you have another process which will force the parties to apply the ethics of arbitration. The parties and the arbitral panel more or less control how long the arbitration will take, right? So that gives the parties the control. And I believe there is the section on award review tribunal actually sets some timelines. 1 second, I'm just trying to pull up the act. But so in answering your question, I don't think that it causes a delay because the parties it doesn't take away from the right of the parties to go to court to set aside an award. That extra layer is actually there for the parties to elect and say that we still believe in the process of arbitration. We actually still think, despite the time and despite the cost that may be involved, because bear in mind, you're going to pay you're going to pay for the lawyers, you're going to pay for the arbitrator's time. But the parties then are saying that we still prefer that review process to going to court. So I don't think it's a delay per se, because it is something that the parties have chosen by their own free will.
Okay, just to clarify, is it still the parties that choose the new arbitrators that will review the award?
Actually, so the arbitration review tribunal, it's what it is that when you remember that you're going to select this process, right? So it is expected that in your arbitration agreement, you state how the process would be. Do you understand? So it allows the parties a lot of flexibility. Now, this is how it's going to work, the practicalities of it. It's still something, as we know, it's novel. It's not something, I'm not aware so far of any dispute that has adopted that process. So it's still something that will evolve in time, but the parties do control the process. And it is expected that the requirements will be stated in the arbitration agreement.
Okay, thank you so much. So as a new question, we've seen so many people pick up, during the poll that we had earlier, so many people picked Paris and picked the UK as the attractive seats for arbitration, and no one picked Nigeria, unfortunately. So, do you think that the
Nigeria.
adoption, what? My
I
apologies.
picked Nigeria on purpose.
So you picked Nigeria, or none of the participants picked Nigeria. Well, you practiced, so you've probably seen certain things that makes Nigeria attractive as a seat. But do you think that the adoption of the ancestral model law adds to the attractiveness? What do you think makes Nigeria very attractive, or would make Nigeria attractive as a seat of arbitration under the AMA?
Yes. So the AMA under Section 9110, I believe, um, expressly recognizes the ancestral model laws. And that, I think, is a great provision because it ensures that our arbitration law is on the same level as the it has the same international standards as whether London, Paris, or all of this, all the other attractive arbitration hubs, right? So you can't really say because the ancestral is more or less it's the model law. It is the law that if you look at the substantive arbitration law in most of these countries, right, they are model against the model law, hence it's calling the model law. So what that allows is that there is uniformity. There's in different jurisdictions, right? So you know that whether you're going to London or you're going to Paris or you're going to Singapore or you're going to Nigeria, the substantive arbitration law is similar they're all similar to one another, right? And so that allows investors, it gives them the confidence to say, okay, we can bring our money and put it in the Nigerian economy. We can deal with Nigerians because the Dispute Resolution Act, the AMA, recognizes that this is similar to the one that is in our home country, right? So adopting the ancestral model law is definitely, it promotes party autonomy, it allows for predictability, and it not only did it just mention the 9110, not only did it just mention the model law, it also recognizes UNCITRAL's approach towards interim measures. Then and you would find that in section 28 and 29. Also, section 55 adopts ancestral grounds for setting aside an award. So, as opposed to the ACA had a provision that said an award can be set aside as a result of the misconduct of an arbitrator without stating what the misconduct would be, without providing the definition of misconduct. But what the AMA has done is to adopt UNCITRAL grounds for setting aside an award, which excludes vague concepts like misconduct, and then sets out clearly in 55.3 the grounds upon which an award can be set aside, and then goes ahead to say that the party wishing to set the award aside must prove substantial injustice, right? So it's not just, oh, something went wrong with the arbitration. You must also show that that thing that went wrong has caused substantial injustice. And as a result of that injustice, the arbitration award should be set aside. And to practicalize it a little bit, let me give you an example. There have been different rulings or judgments of courts when it comes to um, independence and impartiality, or not independence, yes, independence and impartiality of arbitrators. So and the duty to disclose. There have been certain situations where you will read a judgment and, and that judgment will be the talk of town in the arbitration world that was that failure of the arbitrator to disclose a certain fact, was it really enough to set aside the award? Because did it really affect the independence and impartiality? Right? Now, with this act, what I believe the interpretation of the courts would be, would be that, okay, if you come to the court and you say, oh, let's set aside an award because a party did not disclose. Not a party, an arbitrator did not disclose a certain set of circumstance. And the court will look at it. Okay, yes, in this situation, maybe or maybe not, maybe the arbitrator should have disclosed. But was there substantial injustice? That additional requirements, which is something gotten from the ancestral model laws, makes it even a little bit more difficult to set that aside an award. It doesn't mean that arbitrators should not disclose. I mean, even when you're conflicted whether or not you should disclose, the advice is to err towards the side of disclosing, right? But that's just an example of how the incorporation of the model laws makes the AMA better.
Thank you so much, Ms. Folake. So for Mr. Amuda, I would like to know, or rather, we would like to know, how does the Act approach immunity, arbitrator immunity, arbitration institution immunity? And do you believe that this affects people, or rather international bodies or companies or practitioners from choosing Nigeria as a seat of arbitration?
Okay, thank you very much. Just to quickly just take us back a little, I think, we were talking about the award review tribunal the other time, and in terms of timing, it's 60 days, for the tribunal to decide, the award review tribunal to decide. So that makes it, in the AMA, so that gives it a specific time, I believe section 56. So again, that's and again, there are also limited grounds on which the decision of an award review tribunal can be set aside. And basically that the dispute is non-arbitrable and that it's against public policy. The award is against public policy. So those two things are just limited grounds. So, let me just leave it at that. In terms of immunity, it's a good provision, right? And it's always been. Now, when you talk about immunity, you're basically talking about not the arbitrators not being liable or not being subject to court proceedings or so for their actions during the dispute. Now, it doesn't just apply to the AMA, doesn't just apply to arbitrators alone. It extends further, right, to the institution itself, the appointing institutions, right? So the appointing institutions, their officers are, exempted from, liability or so, as long as they are performing within the course of their duty. Now, there is something that I actually want to critique on that. And basically, there are some instances, right, where an arbitrator will be paid, for something. Now, there are some situations where probably due to lack of disclosure, which is a fault on the arbitrator's part, or just some, behavior of the arbitrator during the course of the proceedings. You ought to do some things, you didn't do it. There are a number of instances, right? Now, there's this question about a fund of the arbitrator's fees. It's just a question I just want to post, just for us on this session, just, we can think about, at what point can an arbitrator refund in that instance? And indeed, can we say that an arbitrator can be liable, in that instance? Funny enough, in the international space, actually, there have been proceedings against arbitrator, right? I've actually even seen, not in Nigeria though, where an arbitrator was convicted, So I mean, these are just some things that was convicted and even sent to jail, right? These are just some things that the AMA tries to prevent, just to let arbitrators have peace of mind in doing their duty. It's interesting because the act doesn't mention tribunal secretaries, which are appointed by arbitrators. So I don't know if they can sue us now or something, because I've acted as tribunal secretary in a number of disputes. So I mean, that's something that needs to be looked into if you look at the provision of the of the law. But basically, that's just the concept that arbitrators, officers, institutions, while acting within, I believe the interpretation will also extend to tribunal secretaries, so as long as they're appointed by arbitrators with the consent of the parties, right? That while acting within the bounds of their duty, they are exempt, they can't be liable for, they have immunity against, suits and things like that. So that's basically the gist of, the provisions there.
Yeah, so like you said, there was an international case where the arbitrator was convicted. So do you think that that's absolute? I believe it's absolute. I'm not certain if it's restricted under the AMA, but do you think that immunity would prevent parties, international parties, from choosing Nigeria as a seat of arbitration?
No, I mean, there are some, for instance, the AMA also provides for, I was talking about some instance the other time that arbitrator knows he or she ought to do something and fails to do it. Arbitrator knows he or she ought not to do something and did it. That action is in bad faith. So there are some instances where an arbitrator will still be liable, right? So it's not an absolute immunity, right? Per se, it's not an absolute immunity. If it can be shown that some of your actions, are still in bad faith. Now, the interpretation of bad faith will now be the one that will be subject to litigation, right? That you acted in bad faith. The question now be what constitutes good faith, what constitutes bad faith. You understand what constitutes good. So that's what will be subject to litigation that has to be proven by a party bringing an action against an arbitrator or an institution or an officer of the institution. In terms of the immunity being an attractive, being a factor for Nigeria being an attractive destination, that's dicey. I mean, almost all jurisdictions have immunities for arbitrator. It's international. It's an international concept, right? But that hasn't stopped, arbitrators being convicted in some jurisdictions, right? I haven't seen a situation, I haven't read a decision unless someone on the call has seen one. I'm aware of, I'm even involved, but I mean, arbitrators have been sued, right? Or been made parties to suit, right? It's a common thing. It's a common thing. There are some instances where you have to make arbitrator party to a suit. It's a common thing. But I'm not aware where a decision has now been made against an arbitrator, whether based on civil liability or criminal liability. I haven't read a decision like that. If there's been one, I believe it should have been publicized, but I haven't seen one like that, so I'm not aware. But that doesn't mean I'm not aware of cases currently in court where arbitrators have been made parties to a suit, where institutions have been made parties to a suit, right? So, but the question of the bad faith is what is subject to interpretation in those suits, to actually make the arbitrator personally liable. In some instances, the suits basically are not against the arbitrator per se. That is, we are going against you per se for your actions. The suits in some instances are basically against the proceedings, in terms of this proceeding should be stopped. The appointment process was not proper, right? And seeking declaratory relief, basically, right? Not particularly seeking relief against the arbitrator for arbitrators doing something or for the institutions doing something. Yeah. So, but in terms of Nigeria being an attractive destination, absolutely, it's a good introduction, and yeah, hopefully it becomes one of the factors to make Nigeria an attractive destination.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amuda. So, for everyone who is attempting to become a tribunal secretary or an arbitrator, you have some certain level of immunity, as Mr. Tohiba stated. So take that into account.
Yeah.
When you are making.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, I will ask both our panelists one final question each. before we move on to questions from the audience. So for if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise up your hands or to put your questions in the chat box, and I'm sure our panelists would love to answer those. So the first question will be directed to Ms. Olake. What do you think are the practical challenges with the implementation of the Act in Nigeria? Of course, we recognize that the Act makes so many changes and modifications that attempts to bring Nigeria into the modern day arbitration scene. But we have to admit that there are certain institutional and structural challenges within Nigeria itself that makes it difficult to implement the Act. So what do you think those challenges are, and how do you think perhaps they could be resolved or not?
Thank you for that. So with any law, good law or bad law, it's the implementation that matters, right? And no matter how good a document can be, no matter how good a law can be, if the users do not apply it correctly, it's not worth the paper it's written on. I remember back in the days, there was, and that was with the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. Initially, when arbitration became more prevalent, there was this belief by the judiciary, right, or some members of the judiciary that arbitration was coming to usurp their powers. And so there was a resistance to the application or the enforcement of arbitration agreements. And that was the position back then. But and I remember institutions like the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators did a lot to ensure that there was sufficient training for judges, right? Because they are extremely key in the implementation of the law. Sufficient training for judges to say, oh, this is actually not coming to usurp your powers. It's actually going to reduce your burden and let people who have commercial disputes use another forum to settle these disputes, right? And so and over time, you would see that with certain judges, some provisions are given a favorable disposition. Depends on, I mean, there were some areas of discretion. I would say the ACA left a few more things to the discretion of the courts, right? The AMA provides better clarity, right? So in this situation, to ensure that the new provisions in the AMA, what it intends to do, and ensuring that the implementation is widespread. Training is very important for our judicial sector. You know, these new provisions, they are nice, but the people who are going to implement them must be aware of them, must be aware of the effects, must be aware of the spirit of the law, right? So I think that is one way to ensure training. Because if you look at it, and one of the biggest things that disadvantages, or one of the most unattractive thing, you can hear me clearly. The most unattractive thing, or one of the unattractive thing about arbitration in Nigeria is that a lot of people consider it to be the first step to litigation. You go through the entire process, but you still end up with litigation. So some of the provisions that would allow, that would usually send parties back to court have been sorted out, have been dealt with explicitly in the AMA. So it is just ensuring that the judges are aware of this provision, aware, and they are aware on the best way to interpret it in different situations, right? Another thing would also be training ourselves as lawyers as to the provisions of the AMA on
My apologies, Ms. Sadiq. Are you still on the call?
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm not quite sure if you heard what I was saying.
Yes, we did. At the point where we stopped hearing you, you were discussing about how we have to focus on training ourselves as well as legal practitioners.
Okay, the network is really bad. I don't understand why, because I've had a meeting earlier today. But okay, yes, I was saying that as legal practitioners as well, that we also need to equip ourselves with the knowledge of the AMA and understand how it works. Another thing in general that may affect the implementation of arbitration or whether or not arbitration is seen as a viable option is the cost of arbitration. Right. But that is a different debate. The cost of arbitration, there's a general belief that arbitration is expensive. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but it's also important, right? That I mean the perception exists, right? And that is considered a hindrance sometimes for parties. So if you look at the law, it has given a lot of relevance to arbitration institutions. And these arbitration institutions now are, in my opinion, even have more of a duty to not only train people, but also be conscious of the cost of arbitration so that more people are encouraged to use arbitration to resolve their disputes. So I feel those are some of the issues we might face with the implementation of the law.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sadiq. So for Mr. Tohib, still on the challenges on implementation, considering the fact that one of the major legal conflicts we tend to have in Nigeria is the conflict between federal and state laws. So let's take Lagos, for example. Lagos has its own arbitration law as well. If an international body or international party were to come to Nigeria, were to come to Lagos for the resolution of their dispute using arbitration, do you believe that there would be conflict between the AMA and between the Lagos state arbitration laws? And if there are, would that affect people choosing Nigeria as a seat of arbitration?
Yes, thank you very much. I think in terms of conflict of laws, right, the Nigerian Arbitration and Mediation Act, it's a national law, it's a federal legislation, right? The act hasn't harmonized with state laws. So for instance, there is still the Lagos State Arbitration Law 2009, right? So the Arbitration and Mediation Act is a national legislation. So I mean, how to be careful about this in terms of dispute resolution is being very particular about drafting, right? That what law do you actually want to be applicable to your arbitration agreement? Do you want it to be Lagos state law or the national law? So in as much as Nigeria's Arbitration and Mediation Act hasn't harmonized our laws, our arbitration laws, right? They are all valid legislation and they stand alone. Now, Nigeria having assented to and being a party to ancestral model law and the New York Convention might be an added advantage, because in interpreting or interpretation of either the federal legislation or the state legislation, our courts are minded of this international legislations. So irrespective of the law that was chosen by parties, right, in the dispute resolution, these international legislations will serve as an added advantage, right, which is an added benefit. And so, I mean, those two laws, and a number of other ones like that, even up to enforcement of ICSID decisions, investment treaty arbitrations, for instance, in Nigeria, the enforcement of ICSID award is directly by the Supreme Court, right? So these are some attractive qualities that still makes Nigeria, a reliable enforcement destination. The challenge, which I will just say, which I will go back to in terms of going back to Folake's question, relates to enforcement, recognition and enforcement. To me, the problem comes from our constitution, right? I believe section 241 of the constitution. Recognition orders from courts is also a form of final decision, which you can appeal as of right. You don't need the leave of court. In terms of reviewing the AMA, that's also something that I feel might also need to be looked into, whether there has to be a constitutional review or something like that. How can we make our awards not being subject to you can appeal it anyhow to an apex court, right? If you look at the AMA, the section on leave that provides for leave is when you are talking about laying on award. But for you to actually appeal an arbitration award, I feel you should need the leave of a recognition order, because when you get an award, some parties comply immediately with the award, but you still need to go to court again for recognition and enforcement. So when you get that recognition and enforcement order, for you as a party, probably as a judgment debtor, to appeal that, I feel you need the leave of court. It's what is done in England. I've been involved in arbitrations in England where we got an award, we got the recognition order, a party sought to challenge that award and was not granted leave. That's the end. It ends there and then. So I think that's something that we should adopt in Nigeria in terms of, shouldn't just be able to, appeal anyhow. There is a national policy on arbitration and ADR now, which sets time limits on appeal. That also needs to be enforced. In fact, similar time schedules, the AMA provides for, appeals to the national policy says, at least an appeal should be heard within 6 months of filing, right? And that a high court should hear it within 40 days, right? So, and the AMA actually also even has a similar provision in third schedule that specifies timelines that that the court should hear, an arbitration claim. And I believe it should be concluded at least up to the Supreme Court within 2 years. Everything should be within 2 years, right? And you should file, a matter must be listed on the court list within 6 months, of it being filed, an arbitration appeal, at the Court of Appeal. So these are some of the things that actually can be implemented, right? The laws are there. I think it's a matter of implementations, harmonization of the laws. As I said, state laws and federal laws stand side by side, right? Only helped by the international, legislations, such as the, ancestral model law and the New York Convention, and now with the Singapore Convention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muda. Thank you so much, Ms. Falake. I believe this brings us to the end of our panel session. This has been such a packed, impactful session. I have personally learned so much, and I'm sure that everyone else here has learned as much as well. We have a few audience questions, but because our time is really fast spent, we are just going to take one of the questions. And I think this has been sent to Mr. Tohib. It says, hello, sir. In your professional opinion, how effective do you believe arbitration will be in resolving disputes related to legal gray areas such as AI, blockchain, IP, etc.? If you think it will be effective, how do you see it playing out in practice?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I mean, arbitrations have been are being used in resolving blockchain smart contract disputes. Again, one of the innovations that the AMA, brought is like extending the definition of an arbitration agreement to include electronic communications. It means that arbitration clauses, dispute resolution clauses on the blockchain can be subject to arbitration, right? Mediation can be subject to, or mediation. And as long as those are electronic communications, electronic platforms, right? The AMA covers that. Arbitration specifically covers that. In fact, there are trainings, on blockchain disputes, smart contract dispute. I have been, fortunate to attend some. I've been involved personally in a smart contract dispute, right? I've had trainings on blockchain disputes, a smart contract dispute. We've done practical examples of resolving the disputes, right? How this dispute works. Online dispute resolution, which is also another form, has been around for a number of years, right? Has been around for a number of years. So dispute resolution arbitration is efficiently, set to resolve any dispute wherever they arise from, whether sports, whether tech, whether ODR, smart contract, blockchain, AI, right? And arbitration also, this position keeps evolving day by day. So just to be short, is that arbitration is effectively, and efficient in resolving, disputes of this nature. If I have had personal experience of, such disputes, right?
Thank you so much, Mr. Muda. I hope the participant who asked that question has heard Mr. Muda. He answered it very comprehensively. So if that's an area you would like to go into, please follow him on LinkedIn and ask for that questions by yourself. So I would really, really like to appreciate our panelists. We cannot thank you enough for your time and for the clear effort you have put into answering our questions here today. It is our greatest honor to have you, and we hope that we can keep in contact with you. I will now cede the floor to the host to introduce the next panel session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidera, and a huge thank you to our speakers. It was such an insightful session. I hope that the participants learned a lot and took notes about certain things that were said. So before moving on to the third panel session, there is going to be a little poll break like we did before. So another set of questions will appear on your screen for you to select appropriate answers randomly. As I said before, all responses are completely anonymous. So Betty will be guiding us through that once again. So she's going to pull up a poll and you're going to see them on your screens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Korea. Okay, so as everyone can see, there is a short poll of just 2 questions for our next panel session. So this would just give everyone here, including our panelists who are about to come up, an idea of the audience that we have. So I encourage everyone to kindly fill out the poll before it closes. It's not going to be on for much longer. Thank you to everyone that is currently filling out the poll. I would leave it on for just about a minute for more people to have the opportunity to do the same. Okay. I think a good number of people have filled in the poll. All right. So just so we don't waste any more time, I would be closing the poll now and revealing the results so that everyone can get to see what we all think about these particular questions. Taking also the results of the poll, people have different opinions about what they perceive to be the biggest challenge in pursuing a global legal career. And there's also a variation of opinions about what skill people think is most essential for a successful global law career. So this brings us to the end of the short poll session. I would now be handing over back to Korea to quickly introduce the panelists for our next session.
Thank you so much. Now we have the third panel session, which I am personally excited about because it is titled Building a Global Career in Law Practice, Opportunities and Challenges for a Budding Lawyer. And moderating the session will be For God's Favor. And joining him as speakers are Miss Ijeoma Nwala, Mr. Oluwaseun Ayansola, and Miss Chisom Anemeje, who will bring valuable insights with their diverse legal experiences. A quick profile on the speakers. First, we have Miss Ijeoma Nwala. She is an accomplished finance lawyer with a strong focus on fund finance. She advises a range of clients, including banks, private equity funds, asset managers, and other financial institutions, both domestic and cross-border fund finance transactions. Ms. Ijeoma has a deep experience structuring and negotiating a broad spectrum of fund finance products. Her practice covers subscription credit facilities, net asset values, hybrid facilities, asset-based lending, co-investment structures, as well as general partner and management lines. She acts for lenders, sponsors, and borrowers, offering tailored legal and commercial insights that help drive transactions to a successful close. Ms. Ijeoma holds an LLM in International Banking and Finance Law from the London School of Economics and Political Science, UK. She earned a bachelor's degree from the Nigerian Law School, following her completion of her LLB from the University of Nigeria. The second speaker, Oluwaseun Ayansola, is an associate in the project finance team at Norton Rose Fulbright LLP in London. He is also the founder of the Emerging Career Academy, an e-learning platform offering courses in emerging areas of law, technology, and finance. He holds an MSc in Law and Finance with distinction from the University of Oxford. Prior to Oxford, Oluwaseun was an associate in the banking, finance, and fintech teams at ALN Alukwan Oyebode, where he completed a secondment at MTN Nigeria Communications PLC, the country's largest communications power. His earlier professional experience includes roles at KPMG, PwC, Africa Finance Corporation, and Rand Merchant Bank. Mr. Oluwaseun's commitment to social impact through Emerging Career Academy has earned him the recognition as one of Nigeria's top 21 new establishments and 2 nominations for the Future Africa Prize for Lawyers. Outside of work, he's passionate about mentoring and volunteering. Our third speaker, Ms. Chisom Anemeje, is a passionate and dynamic lawyer with a strong foundation in corporate and commercial law, a proven track record of delivering high-quality services. She currently works in the fund finance team at King & Spalding, where she advises both lenders and borrowers on subscription credit facilities, NAV facilities, and hybrid financing. With hands-on experience in drafting and reviewing complex agreements, managing new facility requests, and coordinating multiple facility agreements, Ms. Chisom plays an integral role in ensuring seamless transaction execution from structuring to closing. She's a UK qualified solicitor and common law qualified lawyer. She previously excelled as an associate at Banwu and Igolado, where she helped structure and close high-value finance transactions. She is known for exceptional work ethic, resourceful research skills, keen attention to detail. Ms. Chisom is deeply committed to the regulatory compliance and client-focused advisory. She holds an LLB from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, a BL from the Nigerian Law School, and she's also a member of the Nigerian Bar Association. Over to you, God's Favor.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this third panel session of the Lex Lata Career Seminar. And it's my utmost pleasure to as well welcome our speakers, our panel speakers. We have three amazing individuals as Kowiyat, as earlier mentioned. We have Miss Ijeoma, we have Mr. Oluwaseun, and we have Miss Chisun. So the modalities for this panel session would be the same as the previous. I'll be asking questions to individual panelists, and I might invite responses from all the panelists. And I also implore the audience to put down questions they might have in the panels in the chat box, as there will be a question and answer session following the panel session immediately. So to my first question for this panel session, it will be directed at Ms. Ijeoma. What motivated you to pursue an international legal career, and how did you identify the right firm and the right jurisdiction to grow in?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for the invite to join this panel, and also to sort of speak to my experience as a lawyer. I think that's a really interesting question. So what motivated me to study law is a bit of a funny one. So growing up, it was as someone who grew up in a Nigerian environment, it's always a question of what professional course are you going to study, isn't it? So to me, I kind of veered towards the law more as I found that area as something that required critical thinking and analysis. So it's something I was quite natural at. So that's what drew me towards law. And then what motivated me to stay in this profession has always been the opportunity to do something interesting from time to time. In my current practice, I work in an international firm where it's either I'm working with people in different countries or I'm working with people here, but who have different goals. And at the same time, you're doing different things, different baskets within that same fund finance space. So it never gets boring. And that's something that drives me, being able to do something that is exciting and you wake up in the morning and I look forward to it. So I think that's what has motivated me to stay in the career that I'm in. And then also, I think the other side of the question was in terms of navigating the space itself, it's always an interesting thing because you find yourself moving from one environment, which is Nigeria, where everyone is so to speak, it's where I've grown up and it's a place that I know. But then moving over to a country where there's that cultural shift, being able to navigate that is always a different thing. So I've been able to lean on people that have done it before me. That's a way that I've managed to navigate it. Always speaking to people, always asking questions, attending seminars like this, being able to learn from experience of people that are currently doing what I'm interested in doing and learning from what their experience is. So that has always been an eye-opener for me in my in navigating my career, especially to getting to where I am now. So yeah, that's been my journey.
All right, thank you so much, Ma, for that beautiful response. I'll be directing my next question to Miss Chisun. So looking back, what academic or career decisions made the biggest difference in setting you up for global opportunities?
Thank you like Ijoma said, thank you for having me here. And to answer that question, I would say that, first of all, not to sound all spiritual, but first of all, I would say that you can rule out the presence of God and direction, because if I could pinpoint anything certainly that says, okay, this is what set you up for a global career, then I would not like, I'll be joking. But to be fair, I would say while in school, that's University of Nigeria, I I got around the right people and also saw the need for an internship. And around, let's say, third year or fourth year, I started exploring internship with top law firms in Nigeria. And that gave me what I would call an hunger for more, because you're seeing them dealing with high profile clients, cross-border transactions, and there's just this yearning to probably be on the other side of the transaction, or to want to know more. And that set me up for my career at Banwani Godalu, and also that was what I would call like a pedestal for my career right now at Kingston Spalding. So to answer your question, that would probably be the career decision I made, the internship, and also working at BNI, because that was everything I needed to want to be on the other side of the transaction, because the deals are very high profile, they're cross-border and also engaging. So you're the Nigerian counsel on a deal, but you're looking at English law documents and you're just wishing you could actually review them as an English lawyer. So yes, that's what I would say set me up.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much. So as a follow-up question to that, I will be directing the question to both you and Ms. Ijeoma once more. How did your experience in Nigerian law firms like Banwo and Godalo set you up for the expectations of the global career, like the one you have in Kenya Spalding?
So for one, BNI is a big law, so the hours are also equally very not insane, but very busy. So that's one culture that transcends just beyond Nigeria. So that's something I would say was for me very good, because I realized that you needed to work really crazy hours on deals, and also that is something that is very much applicable right now. And then another thing again, I had to look at some English law documents, not reviewing them, but somehow that makes you familiarize yourself with some English law loan agreement, or well, at that point it was loan agreement, charter parties and the likes. But that there's just a level of familiarization with this drafting and how it is. There's the LMA, there are things like that that I will call very transferable skills that are also very much required right now. So that's one thing I can say, for example, that BNI exposed me to, knowing that the hours are always very, very intense in a Nigerian law firm and also over here, and also the fact that the transaction documents are very much alike. And then Nigeria is a common law jurisdiction, so that helps.
All right, ma'am.
Sorry, God's favor, you were saying something. You got cut off there. Hello? God's favor.
Yeah, I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, I thought you were going to ask something else. Sorry. Did I cut you off?
All right. The question was, I was supposed to direct the same question at you.
Oh, yeah.
Looking, how did your experience in Nigerian law firms, like Nigerian law firms you worked in, how did it set you up for global opportunities in the global pace of career opportunities in different jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think I would second what Chisholm said. Being able to become familiar with some of the documentation that where you currently like you would look at, it's a global thing. The LMA, it's a global association that it's a global finance association. It's called the Loan Market Association. So they do produce documentation that most jurisdictions use, but particularly the UK, in the United Kingdom, a lot of finance lawyers will tend to start with those LMA documentation. So it gives you, working in a global law firm or in a big law firm in Nigeria kind of opens up that experience. It gives you the opportunity to become familiar with those type of documents, but also things like there are other soft transferable skills which every lawyer needs to have. And working in a fast-paced environment like BNI or Udo Udo Mambelo Sage like I did, they tend to help to build you up in that way. So you quickly develop time management skills, you quickly develop analytical skills, but be it that you're reviewing documents or you're drafting them, or you're speaking to people about those documents that you've drafted, or you're doing, like I did at the time, you're doing regulatory work, compliance work in Nigeria. Those things quickly build up your skills. They build up a communication skill. They build up your time management skills. They build up your analytical skills. So, and I think these are the core foundation for every lawyer. You need to be able to think outside the box. You need to be able to query things. You need to be able to ask questions, have a broader understanding of why am I here? What am I doing? How do I move from here to there? How can I be better? What have I done wrong in the past? And how can I make that better? So those type of questions, those type of skills, they help you move from a Nigerian lawyer, a local law counsel to becoming an international lawyer. They're always the same. You're always going to be leaning onto those type of skills.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much for your response. I'll be directing my next question at Mr. Oluwaseun. So, do you believe that advanced degrees like the MLF at Oxford are essential in international practice, or are they just alternative ways to stand out?
Thanks, God favor. And like the other speakers before me, excited to be speaking to you all this afternoon. Just before I answer your question, I thought it might be useful to know what the composition of the room is. So can the participant just put in the chat, are you guys undergrads, what level, or are you young lawyers? Just so, I can have a feel for the room and know, how to, direct my or respond. Okay. So Esther is in 500 level. Yeah, I can see the chat, God's favor, I think. So I've seen a few responses. Okay, great. So the majority of the room undergrads. Well, to answer your question, I think whether it's essential, the short answer is it depends. So if you're gone in for an international career in international law or international trade, the minimum requirement to work for the UN or for the WTO is an LLM or a master's degree. So there are certain careers, international careers, that you need a master's to even, have a conversation for those careers. So the answer is that it depends on what your career is. So if you want a career in international law, like I said, that's the very first example that jumps at me. Or maybe you want a career in academia, for instance. So like Dr. Kineji, you want to be a law professor. So if you want to be a professor at Oxford, you need a master's at Oxford and then a PhD before you can even get like a research assistant position. So for those kind of careers, a master's is a no-brainer. It's kind of like the minimum requirement. But for transactional work like law, and depends on the type of law as well. So if you're in banking, the answer is no, it's not essential. In fact, what's even more important is your deal sheet, experience actually doing the deal. Some of the partners that I work for don't even have a master's degree. So in that kind of career, you don't need, a master's degree. But of course, then to the other limb of your question, it's a way of leveling up. So having it can then help you to stand out, even if it's not essential or like required, for like a career in transactional law, for example. So one reason why anyone would consider, or for most Nigerians, one, it is the ease of immigration. Going abroad using a master's degree is almost the easiest and the most legitimate way. So that's why most people go through that route. And then of course, like the reputation of your, or if you like, pedigree of the school or the university is another reason why some, and like you said, you may need that to stand out. And then there are some law firms that are kind of big-headed and like only hire from like certain schools. Maybe if you were in America, they hire from like Ivy League universities, and then in the UK, Russell Group. So for that reason, you might need a master's to stand out. But yeah, to answer your question, is kind of like a combination of those two things and more. There are other reasons why you might need a master's, but for certain careers, it's essential. But for certain other ones where the focus is on your experience, it's not, but you might need it to stand out. I think that's the answer to that.
All right, sir. Thank you much for that response.
Yeah.
So much for that response, Mr. Shem. And I'll be asking a follow-up question in that regard. Do grades still matter after graduation, especially when applying to firms abroad? Probably after getting experiences, would grades still matter in applying to firms abroad?
Yes and no. So I get asked this question a lot. I think the truth is, on the job, your grades don't matter, and you can finish with a third class, but you're very creative, and you think outside the box, like I think Ijoma or Chisom alluded to earlier. That's what makes you stand out on the job. But what people don't also talk about enough is getting a chance to show that you're that creative and experienced or intelligent. So most times you get weeded out even before you get a chance to speak to the interviewers to show how intelligent you are. So grades matter to one. If you're thinking like I did, using like a master's degree to get into the blah blah blah, then obviously you need good grades to get into a good school. And then, the good school maybe, helping you to get into like a good firm, whatever. So yes, it matters up to a point, it matters to, even in Nigeria, like, there are certain firms, and I think Banwa and Ighodalo and maybe G. Elias, they're firms that almost exclusively, hire first class students, either from the law school or undergrad. So grades matter to get you into that law firm in Nigeria, which, as Ijoma mentioned, kind of gives you a feel for what an international career is. So if you work for Alukwano, Body Bound and Uganda and any of these firms, you already, get assimilated like to the culture, the hours are long. And so when you go abroad, like it doesn't feel new to you. So at the end of the journey, it doesn't, but it helps you to throughout your journey. And in my biggest argument is, and if you're in 300 level or in 100 level and you're here, if someone told you grades didn't matter, just now shut it down. If you make a first class or two strong 2-1 out of school, it just makes your journey easier. And then, when you're applying to university, or sorry, for your master's and you're applying for scholarships, even at that point, getting good grades helps your application. So grades is kind of like a gift that keeps on giving. You might 10 years down your career, people still put, on their profile that they finished with this degree or whatever. So it kind of like helps the journey. So, but on the job, not so much. Literally everyone around you, has very good grades, but to get you into the door, yes, and to get you good opportunities, grades definitely matter.
All right, sir. Thank you so much once again for that response. So the next question will be directed at Miss Chisom. How did you choose your specialization? And would you advise, and at what stage would you advise that students also lean towards a particular specialization?
So I would love to say my specialization chose me. Well, I while in school, I was 100% sure I was going to be an energy law lawyer. Like I was so sure. I want to be oil and gas lawyer. And I proceeded on to internships where I was still very convinced. And a day before call to bar, I listened in on something like this, but in person. And the speaker was very convinced that finance law was the next big thing. And I would say I bought into that very, very well. His arguments were very good, very, very good. And I can as well tell you that, but I don't know if it can stand the test of time. But it convinced me that finance was where I should be. And then I moved. I moved to finance law. But now this is where chance comes in, or maybe grace, or anything you want to call it, because I moved to BNI and there's a rotational program where you have to have different seats during your NYSC. And so I sat in different seats and I was still like, I'm going to get into the finance department. I was praying for it. And it didn't work. I got finally placed in shipping, aviation, and international trade. And as life would have it, I leaned towards shipping finance more than the shipping litigation aspect of the team. And that was where I would say now it's not just me making a decision because of a talk I had before my call to bar, but me just getting very interested in finance law because I worked on the deals and I found it very interesting and I was convinced that this is where I should be. By the way, I also sat in energy seed, so I got a taste of what I wanted to do and what I finally ended up doing. And I can say this is what I got very interested in. So to answer your question, the second part of your question about um specialization at what part, I would say if you can, and I feel Nigeria offers that. And also if you in the UK, as a trainee, you get to sit in different seats also. So yes, have a bit of everything, especially if you're not convinced about what you should do. Have a bit of everything. It is good. No knowledge is a waste. And also because maybe some years down the line, you will decide you want to be a legal counsel, which exposes you to not just the particular area of law that you're in. Maybe you would have to now deal with other aspects. And also because it's good to have knowledge of literally anything. At least you could hold conversations in a networking event or for different reasons. And that's what I would say. Maybe do not specialize at the initial stage, maybe that first year, and then go on to specialize because of your interest. You may be convinced that this is energy law is your first and only true love, and then have to work probably in construction and realize that this is it. So yes, I would say a bit of everything at first, then specialization. Thank you.
All right, ma. Thank you so much for that response. I'll be directing my next question at Miss Ijeoma, and I would also invite responses from other panelists if they would like to add anything. Can you describe how you navigated the application or recruitment process at your current firm, and what stood you out during the interview or assessment?
Thank you for that question, God's favor. I think it might be more relevant to the people on this seminar for me to talk about my first law firm when I moved to the UK rather than the current one where I'm in, because the movement, but my change from that previous firm to the current one is a very unique story. So I didn't necessarily have to interview, etc. But going back to my first experience when I moved here, I think the application process itself was quite different for me compared to what I was used to in Nigeria. So being able to navigate that was different. For me personally, I found it challenging at first, but what made things easier was speaking to people who were already practicing law here. And one of the biggest differences that made, and in terms of how I approached my application process, was I spoke to someone and that said to me, let me see your CV. And when he went through my CV, he said, your CV is nice, it's good, but it doesn't tell a consistent story. Like your application process, the first thing that people look at is your CV, and your CV tells that story before you walk into the door. So it needs to tell a story. Are you applying to become a finance lawyer in a law firm, or you're applying to become an intellectual property lawyer in a law firm or wherever it is? Your story needs to match up with what you're saying. If you're saying, I am good for this role, I can deliver this, it needs to be consistent. And the story that my CV needed to tell at the time, because I had done litigation in Nigeria, I had done corporate law, I had done so many things. So my CV was all over the place at the time. I put in all the good things I had done in all these firms. I said I was in at the first law firm, which was at JK Gadzama. I was doing litigation for a whole year. I put all the nice transactions that I worked on while I was there. But then how does that help me make the case that I'm a good finance lawyer? It doesn't. So you have to think about those things. So having that conversation with that person was an eye-opener. So that really helped me. And aside speaking to the person that looked at my CV, I also spoke to people that were already finance lawyers in big law firms. And so being able to do that, you get to hear from their experience. It opens up a part of your mind that you don't actually realize. That it makes you think about, oh, do I actually even want this career? What are they doing on a day-to-day basis? How are they managing their lives on a day-to-day basis? What is the pay like? Is that what's going to motivate me? Is that what's going to make everything better? So you always have to think about these things, ask the right questions, because being able to ask those questions and being able to learn from what people are doing will then inform whether this is the right move for you. So in summary, I think being able to understand what makes me different and being able to tell a story in my CV that is consistent with the story that I actually want the recruiter or the partners that are going to be looking at my CV to know about me. Those were the things that helped me to stand out. And I think, like Oluwaseun mentioned, your master's degree gets you into the door. It does. It really does. I think mine helped. It was in a good university, so I think that also helped to open the door. So that helped me to stand out. I think that goes to the second part of your question. That helped me to stand out. But when you then walk into the door, how have you prepared yourself to answer those questions? How have you prepared yourself to communicate and to let everyone know? Because all you're doing is you're telling people how I'm going to add value to your team. So how have you prepared that pitch? How are you prepared to answer those questions? So being able to do those things, understand, and research is also another thing as well. Being able to research and understand, what door am I walking into? Am I going to be speaking to transactional partners? Am I going to be speaking to litigation partners? If I'm applying to a law firm that is a finance firm or a corporate law firm, but they have they have a finance team that I'm interested in working with, the partner that I'm going to be meeting in that room, what is his area of specialism? So you have to research the person you're walking into the room to speak to. You have to speak to the things that interest that person. So one of the things that helped me was to talk about my my master's project, the final dissertation that I submitted. That was a very big topic at the time. So having that conversation with them, and imagine walking into a room and you have four partners literally on your panel, and those are the people that you're going to be answering questions from. You have to change the conversation in a way that it then becomes not a, an inquiry, so to speak, but more of a conversation between you and them. So that's one thing I think helped me to stand out, being able to research people, understand what room I'm working into, speaking to people who have done what I'm looking to do, and learning from their experience and being able to apply it to myself. Because sometimes what people have done may not work for you. It may not work for me. How I got how I've navigated my journey might not work for the next person. So being able to adapt some of these experiences to the way that will work for you is another way that is something else that helped me to stand out. So yeah, I think that would be my response from my experience. Research people, speak to people. It's very important to ask the right questions. Make sure that your CV is telling a consistent story about yourself, and make sure you're adapting the right things to your circumstances.
All right, man. Thank you so much for that beautiful response. I'm not sure if the other panelists would like to add something to this particular question. Okay.
I think I echo all that Ijoma, said. And I think just in general, whether it was my interview to get into Aluko or my current firm at NRF, I think, as she said, first you have to anticipate the kind of first, what are you applying for? So in my case at ANO, I was applying into the banking and finance team, and at NRF, similar. What I thought was very relevant to, like, at NRF, sorry, so at ANO, my internships, so most of you, I think some of you are undergrads at Obafemi Awolowo University, and the calendar can be demonic sometimes, to say the least. And so we had like this hiatus, or kind of like the stall period between when we finished and when we went to law school. But I mean, everyone knew that. So knowing that we would have almost 9 months before law school meant that I could fill in as many internships into that period. And I tell you, even till today, those internships are still paying dividends. Like, one of the internships I did that period was with the Africa Finance Corporation, which is a big lender on the continent, and most firms in the market, are trying to win briefs from them. So having those relationships was a big game changer, and you can always name drop. It's what people do in this market. So that was something that I did as an undergrad, saying, okay, I had like, 9 months until law school. What can I do in this? So I started applying a year prior, to KPMG. Basically, again, the logic for me was, at the time, I always knew I wanted, an international career. So, and I spoke to an HR person, and their logic was perfect. They said, everyone is taking a risk on a candidate, but what makes them get comfortable is if you have an international brand that they know and trust on your CV. So if you are good enough for Barclays, or you are good enough for Goldman Sachs, then you likely be good enough for Citibank, or any other investment bank. So you need to do those internships at like firms that, wherever you want to work in the world, like, they know that brand. So if you get an internship at Bank of America, and a bunch of you are already doing that from your undergrad now, that's a game changer, because there is no firm in London that doesn't know Bank of America or Goldman Sachs, or what about the consulting firm, McKinsey, Bain and Co, yada yada. So just getting those named brands and, like, reputable firms on your CV helps to get HR comfortable. So it's you're trying to mitigate the risk. The person is taking a risk on you, but they can satisfy themselves that, oh, this person is worked in our world, so is familiar with how things work here. So yes, those internships for sure were a game changer, whether in Nigeria or abroad, certainly was. And then, but also, like, doing those internships, what it helped me to do at the time was not know exactly what I wanted to do, but what I did not want to do. So very quickly, I knew I wanted to do banking and finance. So after the first internship, I just continued gathering, very consistent experience, whether in tax or in banking, blah, blah, blah. So by the time I was applying, applying to ANO, already had, and to the advice that Ijoma was giving, kind of already could tell a story that, listen, this is an interest of mine. And then whoever was looking at my CV would be like, oh, like, okay, so this is your interest, blah, blah, blah. So, and then that was ANO. And then at ANO, and I'm not sure if it was Chisom or Ijoma who mentioned to this earlier, you're already working with these firms. So if you're thinking about an international career at a big law firm abroad, working for a top law firm in Nigeria is kind of the route for you, because you're already on the deal. So you're basically just jumping ship to the other side. So you're on these transactions, well, obviously you're advising from a local law perspective, but you can see the documents, you can, and sometimes even beyond the scope of your work, you can make useful comments, beyond just, Nigerian law issues. So you already know the deals, you already know the structure, you know the transaction. So whoever is hiring you again thinks that you're familiar with how things are done in London or wherever. So that was a game changer. In fact, so back to what the um, game changer was for me at my current job. The partner who interviewed me, I had worked with previously. So there was, you already have like kind of like a reputation. They've seen you on a deal, and then, they want you to speak to those deals and so on. So yeah, so if I would break that down, I would say, or in summary, you're an undergrad, you need to get those internships, and just don't get any internship. You need to get internships that anywhere in the world, those names will matter. And then you need to obviously get very good grades. And if you're looking, obviously you do, maybe NYC at a very good law firm and then work a few years if you want. If not, you can always move abroad, but after working for a top law firm. I think, and then, if you're going through the master's route, get like, a very good university in there. And if you put all of that together, I think that will give you a very solid chance.
All right, sir. I'm not sure if Ms. Chisholm would like to add any other thing to what I've said.
No, actually, I'm 100% in support of what has been said. Yeah.
All right, sir. So I'll be proceeding to the next question, which I'll direct at Ms. Chisholm. What role has mentorship, either formal or informal, played in your journey? And how can junior lawyers or, in fact, law students find and create those relationships?
I'll first of all start with the fact that I'm in finance law can actually be a product of the mentorship, maybe not personal, but like I said, it was in a circumstance like this that I had the switch. So for one, I would say I studied law, and I don't know how many people, but for me, I'm like the first lawyer in my family. So I had very few, like I had no idea of what I wanted to do at some point. I just know I was studying law. There was no guidance from maybe like a dad or uncle or anything of that sort. So honestly, I knew I needed mentorship from people outside. And I wouldn't lie, it was very instrumental to my career path. For one, I met people who have made it in life, in the industry. I also met people who I could look up to, like even in finance law, even in energy law or things like that. It was very, very instrumental for me. And where can you find these people? Do not underplay the power of LinkedIn. Reach out to people on LinkedIn. It's very, very important to actually know how to network. Then if you have the opportunity to go for networking events, paid or unpaid, but giving the people that are here unpaid, there are a lot of unpaid networking events you could actually go to. Internships is very important. They're all very important because for me, I got to know people through internships, just like Sean said. You would meet people. You not just going to work and coming back after the internship. You just forget everybody and everyone forgets you. Try as much as possible to just keep talking to these persons, maybe on LinkedIn, or just maintain the relationship because it will be very beneficial for you. Then what else can I say? You after this kind of events, I'm sure Sheung and Ijoma, for example, will be very approachable on LinkedIn. Tomorrow, if you decide to want to know what to do next, or this is where I am currently, what do you think? I'm sure it's something that you can actually explore, Chisom included. So it's something you can actually explore. Don't just come for this event and go and that's it. You've gotten enough juice to run for the next. month or two, and then you're back to square one because there's no refill. So the thing about this mentoring and how important they are is from time to time, you come back to see these people's growth and they inspire you. Senior colleagues in school, Ijoma inclusive, are part of the people I can call my mentors because I see their track and it's something that, okay, if Ijoma can do this, I can. Or most of them, like for example, I know someone that came into BNI and he was just a year ahead of me. And I was like, okay, so if this person can get into this place, then I can. So they all define path for me to actually know it's possible to actually get into this place. Because except you do have like already mentors in your life, then I would advise you to either look around you, people ahead of you in school, or if your goals are way beyond what you've seen people achieve, then go to LinkedIn, read a lot so that you can have conversations with random people and your knowledge will sell you out. Like just if you're interested in an area of law and there is someone who stands as an authority in this area of law, you could just read a lot, just hold a conversation with this person and it would surprise you. I have a colleague who actually moved all the way from India to Dubai just because he offered to be a research assistant to a partner in Dubai. A partner in Dubai who was an authority in project finance. And he offered to be a research assistant and he was doing this free of charge for a while. And then after a while, the man was like, okay, I'm working on this deal. Would you want to come and work with me? So something, that level of exposure is something that I never had the opportunity to do. For me, I was just looking at people around me and how much they've achieved. But listening to people who actually just go beyond their circle or go beyond what their eyes could see, to random people on LinkedIn, and you have a good profile, you're reading articles, you're putting out articles. So this person knows that you're just not someone looking for someone to tell you what Google can also tell you. So you're reading, you're putting out articles as little as you could, and then you're reaching out to someone offering assistance on things like that, or even if the person post something about, oh, maybe fund finance tomorrow, you're commenting and your comment is actually very intelligent that, okay, this. Just keep it up. One day, someone will notice you enough to be interested in you and want to mentor you. Because I understand the fear of having random people just message you and you're not exactly sure. Because first of all, your life is very busy. But when you're seeing this person's traction on LinkedIn and the person is showing knowledge in the little form that they can, somehow you're very interested in helping this person's journey. So if just to reiterate, like first one, people around you, very important. Then if you want to go beyond that, your circle, you could look at people who have made a mark for themselves on LinkedIn and reach out to them. Many people may not answer you, but one person will definitely give you an opportunity. And I think that's all you need.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. And seeing that we have spent much time, I'll be asking the last question, which I would be directing to all the panelists. So if you could go back in time, what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self at the start of your legal career? And I'm seeing that the most of participants here are undergraduates, even down back to your undergraduate days. So I will start with Mr. Oluwaseun, then Ms. Ijeoma, and lastly Ms. Chisom. Thank you.
Thanks, God favor. I think what I would do differently is definitely start earlier than I did. So like I said, my very first set of internships were my 500 level. So, and I have seen the trajectory of like some of my junior colleagues, and some of you may know Zainab and David and Tolu and the rest of the guys who were just in the year below us. So from your first or like your second year, there is nothing stopping you from applying to those Bank of America internships and wherever it is in the world. Like there's just this audacity that Nigerians have that you should. And someone alluded to it earlier. it's different when someone who went to, you know, I don't know, uh, maybe Canterbury in London for their secondary school and then went to Oxford to like do great things. You might still feel like maybe it's because they went to those schools, you know, for the undergrad. But it's different when someone who slept on the same bunk or the same bed as you at Faji or maybe Awo or something is making waves in the world. It kind of gives you the audacity to feel like if that person can do it, I absolutely can. And there are so many examples around you. So I think for one, I would have started earlier and I'm, you know, actually encouraged. So if, and doesn't matter if you're in 500 level now, is whenever you wake up, that's your morning. So you better start, you know, looking at those opportunities. It can start with like a simple Google search. And that was how it started for me. Just Googling what opportunities, international opportunities for young lawyers. And literally that final year when, because until that time, I was a local champion, if I can admit it. You know, we were going to competitions in Uniben and you know, going for moot competitions all around Nigeria. And that was all there was to it. And until the 500 level when, you know, it was like kind of like a light bulb moment that, you know, I thought, why play locally when you can, you know, use all these, you know, resources to your at your disposal to, you know, aim for those international opportunities. And, you know, that's when things actually started to change and open up. So literally, I think it's just time. When you start early, you can cover like a lot of like field before you graduate, and it's 5 years. Such feels like such a finite time. There's so much, you know, infinite opportunities that can be locked into that time. So I think everything else will just be a consequence of what you did during those 5 years. So I'll say, if anything, I wish you know, I'd started gunning for these international opportunities early.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for that response. We'll be having Mrs. Ijama next.
Thank you, God's favor. I think there are so many things that I would like to say to a younger me, but one particular advice which I caught on much later on in my journey is simply to go where life takes you, right? And by saying that, it's a very loaded quote because, and the reason why it's loaded is this, right? Life throws so many opportunities at you. And as someone who is a young lawyer, you might be asking yourself, what exactly am I here for? What is my purpose? What do I like? What do I not like? When you start out, once you're in law school, you have so many things that you're thinking about. Oh, I want to become the best lawyer. I want to go on to become a judge. I want to become this. I want to become that. And those things are all nice. But then you plan and there is a higher purpose for you somewhere else. So being able to go where life takes you makes things easier. You'll be faced with frustrations, you'll be faced with disappointments, but that is just life redirecting you and shifting your path to exactly where you're meant to be going. So by saying go where life takes you, what that means is have all those great ideas for yourself, make all those great plans for yourself. It's really good to have some sort of purpose and direction for yourself, but don't say no to certain things when they present themselves. When I started out, I didn't start out as a finance lawyer. I started out as a litigation lawyer. I did litigation for 1 year in Nigeria before I even moved on to Udo Udoma and Bello Osage, where I did a lot of my corporate transactional experience, where I had a lot of that experience. If I had said no to the litigation experience that I had, I would never have made it into UUBO because it was from that experience that led on to my UUB, and everything since then has been a chain reaction. And so being able to go where life takes you is to trust the path, trust in God, because that's who I believed in and that's who I still believe in as the person that directs me. So if you trust in that sort of higher power and you have some faith in yourself and your ability to make the right decisions, then just understand that certain no's, certain disappointments, certain challenges that you face in life is just God redirecting your path to exactly where you're meant to go. So that's entirely what I would say to myself. Trust the process, go where life takes you. If you're presented with opportunities, don't say no, say yes and embrace them with both hands and trust that it would eventually lead you to where you're meant to be.
All right, thank you so much once again. And lastly, we'd have Ms. Chisholm.
I feel like if I were to talk to my younger self, I would say something like it would work out in the end. And there are several reasons because my career path had looking back, it's been filled with ups and downs. Let's just use that word. And somehow it's working out. We're on the journey, it's still working out, and every day it's unfolding. And just like Sean, I'll also say something like, I wish I had started much earlier too, but not because I started at 400 level, and honestly, I think it's not too late. But why I would have wished I started earlier is because I see what people are doing now, and there's a lot of power in information that I wish I had earlier. Like there are internships. I see someone ask in the comment section if 10 plus and okay, so what next after 10 plus, internship at 10 plus. And here I am after how many years seeing people actually having very international internships. And there I was just very excited that I had gotten internship in Olaniwa Ajayi. And for me, that was like, I mean, I'm at the top already. So yes, there are internships other than just within the shores of Nigeria that is very, very instrumental to your journey. And knowing that, I didn't know that. To be fair, I didn't even know that till I was done. So knowing that just opens your mind or broadens your perspective to all the opportunities out there. Just have the audacity, be daring. And another thing again, I luckily, or by the grace of God, I had good grades in school and much better grades at law school where I made the first class. But I wish I made the first class in school. I had this mindset that, oh, you can't really make a first class in school. Maybe because there's just a lot of stories around my school then where they would say, the last person that made the first class was 100 years ago, that you cannot, they used to do it once in 100 years. And then when you are in third year, you're seeing someone making first class, like you're already in third year, so clearly the damage has been done. Then you're seeing someone making first class like that year, the year after, and you're like, what's going on? You would not tell me the truth. But yes, so don't just believe people's story. People just say what they they are just a reflection of what they never had. So people just come and tell you how difficult it is. Like I can sit down here and tell you how difficult it is to get a job in London and everything, maybe because of the challenges I had experienced. Doesn't mean that's your story. So I can peddle this project, these problems I had to you, and then you take it on as your problem, and it just restricts how much you can achieve. So don't don't listen to those things. I listened, and I mean I was fine with my mark, but I could do better, right? And I'm saying this because there's already someone asking, oh, I don't have a good grades from school. You have the chance to have the best grades in law school. So by the time I woke up, which is my morning, I was already in law school. So I told myself I'm going to make the first class year. So then my sister would tell me, then I was in third year, that you're going to come out with first class. I'm like, my dear, I'm not coming out. Me, I can see my grades and my grades can see me. So you can still make that first class. You can still um retrace your step. You can still make it, like you can still get to that place you want to get to. It may take maybe just a slight longer time than maybe someone else. Or maybe your timing is even different. Maybe you may be lucky. There's just a lot of dynamics to it that do not restrict yourself. And another thing I would say is resilience, because life has beaten me down and I can always tell myself that I will rise again. So after you're done crying, clean your eyes and wake up and go back again to the drill, right? So I would tell my cause I mean everyone expects everything to be easy. Life has not promised you that it will be easy. So when you have that downtime, if someone comes and tells you his own downtime, or maybe Joma or any other person who has made it in life, I like to say what has gone wrong, not to discourage you, but in the event you start experiencing it, you don't feel like your own is different. Do you get? So you just know that it's part of the process, and you know how people will say the end determines the means. That is the reality. So as Ijoma would say, don't put your mind that this is it. Just go where life takes you, or if life beats you down, just know that you're going to get up. Like the beating will not continue to stop at some point. So you get up and you keep trying. You're going to get there. Like you would definitely get there. It may take you slightly longer time than others, but you will. And that's the reassurance that I would give my younger self, that it will work out in the end. So yes.
All right, thank you so much to all our panelists. So quickly we'll move on to the question and answer session. And I can see quite a number of questions already in the chat box. I'll just be reading out the most of them. So someone is asking, okay, I'm a bar aspirant at the Nigerian Law School. I didn't finish with good grades in the uni, but I have a flair for business. I have a flair in business or entrepreneurship, and I want to practice law in the corporate space. Please advise on how to navigate a successful career. So in order to manage our time well, I will be directing questions to individual and panelists, but if you would like to chip in something, you can, of course, go ahead, even though the question is not directed to you. So I'll direct the question to Ms. Chisholm was already answering it. So let me just give the question to her.
So I think I already said what I would say, which is you have a chance in law school to actually redeem whatever you think went wrong in uni. And then secondly, like Shemu said, gather all the internships you can. Well, the only place I would say maybe slightly different, if you can get the really big internships, of course, go ahead. And don't restrict yourself. Apply. What's the worst that can happen? And but do not also downplay the importance of random or very good internships around, because one thing it does is it sets you up for a good law firm in Nigeria, for starters, and that sets you up for the international law firm. So it's a gradual process, particularly in this given the circumstance that you're currently in. One, apply, have the audacity to apply. And okay, so if you have this shortcoming of grades, don't say it's like that. I'm not saying you should lie, but don't come and now say, oh, okay, I graduated with a third class in your CV. You can just put that you're a graduate and then package your CV for the internship and try to do things. Try to, if there were extracurricular things you did in school that you think will sell your leadership skills or things like that, just focus on the things that went right, the things that are good, or not necessarily just the grades. Like focus on other things that would sell you for those internships, because you know that you have somewhere in mind. So yes, the grades didn't go well. Okay, next. Move on to the next big thing, which is try to make sure you have the internship, try to make law school a really good, like what will come out from law school will be really good. And then pray that your externship too is also in somewhere that is good, so that that can also add up to something. There are many other opportunities, right? So I know people who came out with third class and I know where they are right now. So just invest in yourself so that that grades don't define you in any way. Like just invest so much in yourself, do courses online. If you're interested in business, do courses online. Other things that when someone looks at your degree like this, they are not so concerned about, okay, what did this person now make in law in university? Because as they're looking at your degree, they are saying how busy you are or how invested you are. Like Shin will say, on Anijoma will say, your CV is saying a story other than just the grades. So maybe when they now have conversation with you, they will not see how intelligent you are, but you need to get yourself through that door. So to get yourself through that door, get all the courses you can get and internships or many other things. It definitely would work out.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. So moving on to the next question, I think it's directed at all the speakers. but I will appreciate brief responses from all of you. Someone is asking if there are internships generally for in the firms you work at. I don't know, she didn't specify whether it is undergraduate or graduate, but are there internship opportunities at the firms you currently work at?
Yes, they're called VAS schemes. And there are certain times during the year when those vacation schemes open. So the answer is yes. And you just, again, if you haven't been doing that after this meeting, you need to just start. You need to be an information monger. If you go on the firm's website and search up VAC schemes and their periods and what the application process is, then if you have questions, obviously you can reach out to me. Then you can reach out to. There's a young lady, Temitope, I can't remember her last name, who finished from IFE, who is currently joining my firm now as a trainee in October also. And she got her internship, right from like during our undergrad dates, or not internship, her training contract. So, and I believe after doing a vacuum. So again, the sky is your limit. And that's what that was the audacity, that having some people who went to your university doing these things is given, because I wouldn't have dreamt of a training contract when I was a 500 level student. I mean, like, it just blows my mind. Every day when someone reaches out to me and they're like, oh, they're in the final stages, I'm like, what level are you saying? Like 400 level in IFE. I said, yeah, that's amazing. So, and it's important. And the other reason why it's important for us to share, what we would have done differently is to give you guys kind of like a leg up, because, we want you guys to do way better than us. So we want you guys to absolutely be fired up and like saying, I can absolutely, do this. So if you're, yes, the answer is yes, that there are VAC schemes, not just at my firm, just across. Again, I'm sorry to be asked. I don't like people asking me questions that they can find on Google. You need to start Googling stuff, and like the answer is absolutely yes. They're internship.
Just to add from like, I think in our firm as well, all UK firms will definitely have some sort of vacation scheme or open days that you can attend and speak to people. But you also have to be thinking as an international student in Nigeria, you also have to think about visa requirements for attending. I don't know, but I don't think all the firms will be offering, like, they would not offer to pay for your visa to come here. But if you were studying here, for example, you're doing your master's program and your visa permits you to work up to 20 hours a week, they might be able to accommodate you within that. But I don't think they would specifically pay for airfares, visa for a student in Nigeria to be able to come here and do that. But then there are certain other programs. I know that there is the McKinsey Leadership Program. I think it might specifically be for women, but there are certain consultancy firms and certain companies here that offer international internship schemes. So like Oluwaseun said, like Chisom said, research, ask questions. If you see someone that has done an internship in a foreign law firm, ask them how they went about it. There could be some information to be unlocked there. And think about how to get around it, the easiest way to get around it without costing so much to yourself. I know the McKinsey one, for example, they will pay for you. They'll do the visa, airfare, everything to get you to come here and be part of the program for however long it takes. So look out for things like that. And even if there are no internships here per se, the ones in Nigeria, doing it in a really good law firm in Nigeria is another way to set yourself apart. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to show is that you do have those skills. While you might not have a UK firm in your CV, you might have something of an equivalent, which is a big law firm in Nigeria or a good reputable law firm. And there's quite a number of them that have good reputation over here as well. There are certain law firms that you'd mention here, and then people would recall, and people would be like, oh, I've actually worked with or across those partners in those firms. So having those type of firms in your CV is helpful. And even if you don't have all these things in your CV, trust me, there are certain things, being consistent in your journey, wherever you are now, wherever you find yourself, if it's in a local, sorry. If it's in a local firm, it's not a big law firm, learn as much as you can there. Do the most that you can in that environment. At the end of the day, that's what really matters.
All right, thank you so much, Ma. I'll move on to the next question. Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry, just to add, there are also virtual internships that you can explore. So it mustn't necessarily, in case, because obviously visa is a real problem. So you could do virtual internship. I think there's the Forage one that I think Alena Nobri, which is now probably Alena Sherman. You can explore all those ones because I mean, at the end of the day, you just need to show you're busy and it has to be on your CV. So even though virtual, you can explore them too.
All right, thank you so much for that input. The next question is directed at Mr. Shiun. How did you get into the African Finance Corporation? Well, it's okay. Yeah, how did you get into the African Finance Corporation?
Yeah, in my case, it was as a it was a prize for a competition. So those of you who know the Unilag tax law debate um, and also international negotiations competition in India. So because we participated and obviously did very well, so that was like the reward for that. So at the time they were making an exception for myself and the team to intern. But since then, so because they exclusively would only take interns after you've worked in a law firm for a while and then you join them as an intern or consultant, whatever name they call them. So at the time, that was our arrangement. But since then, the organization now has a formal undergraduate internship. So again, that will be something you find on their website. So and since then, if those of you who are in Ife know Alex, Alex has done it. I can't remember who else has done it since, but those are the type of you can reach out to him to know what the process was. But yes, but that was how myself and Great and the rest of the team got our internship. But since then, there's a formal internship on their website that you can apply.
All right, thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all our panelists. Seeing that we are far behind schedule, I would like to end it on this note. And I will be extending my profound gratitude to our panelists for joining us in this session. And I'll be handing over to the moderator, I think, Kowiyat. So thank you once again for joining us, Ms. Chiso, Mr. Oluwashim, and Ms. Ijoma. It's a pleasure to have you guys on board.
Pleasure.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Sorry, I was also typing out something. I have to drop now, but it's been a wonderful. I think seminars like this are really important for students to attend. So thank you to the Lex Lata team for organizing this and to the panelists as well. Thank you for also being here. If anyone has any particular questions, I'm happy to take those on LinkedIn. But I would be dropping off here, and thank you to everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks all. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure joining the session. Like Ijoma said, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you have any specific questions. But yeah, thanks all.
Thank you very much.
So a huge thank you to our speakers. It was a really insightful session. I really actually learned a lot. Thank you to God's Favor for being an amazing moderator. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the 2025 Lex Lata Career Seminar. I once again extend our heartfelt gratitude to the incredible speakers for their time, their insights, and their expertise. And also to the participants, thank you so much for your active engagement. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for participating in the polls. And I really hope that today's session has sparked new ideas and helped clarify your next steps in the legal profession. So if you have any questions to our speakers, like they said, you can contact them on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about the Lex Lata Center, you can visit our social media pages on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can send us a mail at our official email. So that is the end. Thank you for having me as your host. I was really honored to host this amazing event. So I'll just leave you with one thing, which is stay curious, stay connected, and keep building your path towards a global legal landscape. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please, all members of the Lex Lata Career Seminar Committee should please wait behind for just a few minutes to debrief. All right, thank you, everyone. Um, I think we still have some people who are not Lex Lata members on the Zoom call. Can they please kindly exit so that we can have a meeting very quickly? All right, thank you very much to all of you. It's been a very wonderful, very interesting, and very successful career seminar. And I want to congratulate you for pulling off what I regard as a very successful event. So well done to you. Well done to all of you, Betty, Chidera, Kowiat. Kowiat, your network was giving us issues at some point, and that was why I suggested that maybe Betty should take over. But then I think at some point down the line, things became a lot better. So yeah. So thank you very much, Kowiat. Thank you, God's favor. Thank you,